My ex-wife tried to manipulate the court for alimony, but the judge exposed her lies. She faced legal consequences, and I blocked her. Have you ever sat in court and watched someone dig their own grave in real time? Because this is exactly what my ex-wife, Jessica, did. I should have known she was going to pull something. The entire divorce procedure had been a disaster. Delays, tantrums, and unnecessary fillings to squander my time. We wouldn't be here if she had put half the effort into our marriage as she did in making my life horrible. But when she walked into that hearing pregnant, I nearly laughed. Not because I felt the child was mine, I knew it wasn't, but because I could see the plan coming together in her thoughts like a cheap soap opera script. Jessica was hoping that the judge would see a poor, helpless, abandoned pregnant lady and order me to pay up. Forget the prenup. Forget logic. Play the compassion card to get a paycheck. I could already hear her prepared speech. Your Honor, I have a baby on the way, and I've been left with nothing. How am I supposed to survive? All while giving me sideways glances and waiting for me to squirm. Too awful for her. I don't play dumb, and I never lose. Jessica had underestimated me. She expected me to worry, become flustered, and even accept a settlement in order to avoid looking terrible in front of the judge. But she had no idea what I knew. She had no idea that I had already found her out months ago. Jessica was awful not only at marrying, but also at lying. And she had no idea that the judge was about to ask her a question that would unravel her entire story. Jessica strode into the courtroom with a smug expression. She played it flawlessly, with one hand on her belly and the other tenderly combing her hair behind her ear, as if she wasn't about to commit legal fraud. She even sighed dramatically as she took her seat, as if the entire process had exhausted her. I did not react. I didn't have to because, unlike Jessica, I wasn't going in blind. I was ready. My lawyer, Ethan, was also present. Ethan was the type of person who smiled in court but would completely destroy you with the law. I didn't like attorneys much, but after seeing him unravel Jessica's schemes over the last few months, I had to confess I was relieved he was on my side. Jessica, of course, had seen 3 different lawyers since we began this divorce. The one she had today was a newcomer, just out of law school and undoubtedly eager to win his first major case. I almost felt awful for him. Because here's the thing, Jessica had done this before. Not the pregnancy stunt, but the manipulation, the pretended grief, the, I'm just a struggling woman, Your Honor, please take pity on me, performance. Unfortunately, some people purchased it, including my mother. My mother called me about a week before the hearing. Just settle, she urged, her voice full of tiredness. You don't want this dragging on forever. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Mom, she doesn't get a penny. That is why we had a prenup. She is pregnant, though. Do you really want that on your conscience? I nearly lost it. This isn't my kid. Mom hesitated. Are you sure? I wanted to laugh. Am I sure, Mom? She repeatedly cheated on me. I caught her. I halted. Besides, do you know what the worst part is? If I really felt she was my child, she wouldn't have to pull this nonsense. I would be there. I would take care of them. That's the difference between us. She plans, while I take responsibilities. Mom went silent, then sighed. I just don't want to see this get uglier. It was already ugly, but I assured her I'd handle it, which leads us back to the present. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Jessica's lawyer broke down in tears right away. Your Honor, my client has been placed in an untenable circumstance. She's pregnant, unemployed, and struggling as a result of the emotional and financial pressure brought on by this protracted divorce. Jessica sniffled on cue. I did not even blink. Ethan waited patiently, letting the drama unfold. Then he stood up, cool and composed, prepared. Your Honor, while we obviously sympathize with Miss Parker's plight, we need to clarify a few points before moving. First and foremost, he turned to Jessica's attorney. Who is the father of this child? Jessica suddenly tensed. I knew the question was coming. Jessica did not notice it. She imagined the court would not scrutinize her pregnancy, that she could walk in, appear fragile, and walk out with a large check. However, legally, her pregnancy was only meaningful if I was the father. Her lawyer froze and said softly, my client believes it is the petitioner's. I nearly laughed. Believes? Ethan did not even flinch. Does she believe so? There is no proof? Jessica shuffled uneasily. The judge's gaze narrowed. Miss Parker, have you had a paternity test done? Jessica's mouth opened, closed, and then opened again. She was trapped. I just assumed. You assumed? The judge continued, unimpressed. Miss Parker, Is there any evidence to suggest the petitioner is the father? Her lawyer seemed to want to die. Jessica appeared pallid. I relaxed back in my chair, enjoying the entertainment by this point. Ethan was prepared to finish her off. Your Honor, we have strong reason to believe this child is not my client's. He showed out images from 2 months after Jessica and I split up, of her on vacation with another man, holding hands and kissing. Clear evidence that she had moved on. Then came the last nail in the coffin. Ethan slid medical records across the table. Additionally, we have subpoenaed Miss Parker's recent medical records, which show that her first confirmed pregnancy test was months after she and my client had last been together. Jessica's face wrinkled. Her lawyer looked at her, understanding she hadn't told him all of this. The judge gave a long sigh and shook his head. Miss Parker, this court does not tolerate dishonesty. Given the evidence, there is no justification for financial support. The prenuptial agreement stands. You will not receive alimony or further compensation. Boom! Jessica gasped, as if she had been physically struck. Your Honor, this hearing is over, the judge announced. Done. Jessica sat still, immobilized. The judge's remarks lingered in the air, but I could see it occurring in real time. Her mind searching for an escape. This was not how she expected today to go. According to her account of events, she was meant to cry, seem miserable, and leave with a large monthly check. Instead, she had been publicly exposed. Her lawyer stopped staring at her. He was staring at the floor, most likely reevaluating every decision that had led him to take on this case. Meanwhile, Jessica was clutching the table's edge, as if she could somehow cling on to the remaining pieces of her plan. Then the tantrum began. Jessica's final desperate try. But Your Honor, Jessica shouted out in a high-pitched voice. This is not fair. I'm going to have a baby, and he can just walk away. The judge inhaled sharply and rubbed his temples. He was finished. Miss Parker, he stated firmly. This court does not render financial decisions based on emotional appeals. Your pregnancy has no legal bearing on this divorce until paternity is confirmed, which it has not, according to the evidence supplied. But the judge raised his hand. Enough! Jessica snapped. She whirled in her chair, swinging her head at me. Are you really going to do this to me? To your own child? There it was. The final bet. Even after being publicly humiliated, she continued to spread mistrust. The courtroom became silent. Then I gave a leisurely, pleased, vicious smile. You really want to do this, Jessica? I leaned forward and spoke calmly. Do you want to go on record accusing me of being the father? Because we can obtain a court-ordered paternity test straight away. Her face twitched. She had nothing. She knew she didn't have anything. Everyone else in the room felt the same way at that time. This time, the judge did not bother to react. He simply turned to the clerk. The journal is done. Jessica had lost everything. But it wasn't finished yet. The hearing ended, but I wasn't done watching her break down. I went out of the courtroom with Ethan beside me, my mother following a few steps behind. I half expected Jessica to slip out quietly, but I should have known better. She stormed out after me, heels clacking, face flushed, hands shaking. You're a monster, she snarled. You let me sit there humiliated. I gently turned, examining her up and down. I apologize, Jessica. Which part embarrassed you? The portion when you attempted to defraud the court, or the part where you knew I was 3 steps ahead? Her jaw clenched. You set me up. No, sweetheart, I replied, smiling again. You've set yourself up. I just let you walk in. She appeared to want to throw something at me, but then she attempted one more card. She turned to my mother. Are you really cool with this? What did he do to me? Mom hesitated and then crossed her arms. I'm not okay with what you did to him, she told me. You tricked us all once. Never again. Jessica's lips quivered. For a brief moment, I thought she may cry. Then comes the real explosion. I hope you rot, she exclaimed, moving nearer as if she intended to claw at me. I hope you... Miss Parker. The voice sounded from behind her, a severe official tone. Jessica froze. 2 court officers had entered the hallway. Come with us, please. Her head snapped around. What? Why? The judge has recommended an inquiry into potential perjury and fraud, a police officer added. You'll need to answer some questions. Her eyes widened. Wait, no, that's not. However, they were already leading her back into the courtroom. I let out a slow breath. Ethan touched my shoulder. Well, that was satisfying. I smirked. Yeah, it was. Jessica was hauled back to the courtroom. I did not follow. I did not need to. When the court personnel dragged her away, she was no longer my problem, but I made sure to follow up. Turns out the judge wasn't simply upset, he was making an example of her. Faking financial distress? Bad. Attempting to manipulate the court? Worse. Lying under oath? That is perjury. Her bogus claims meant she was now being investigated. The court not only dismissed her alimony request, but also noted her case for probable financial wrongdoing. She dug her own grave. Over the next few months, I learned bits and pieces. The judge fined her for wasting the court's time. Her lawyer dropped her immediately. Her attempt to apply for government assistance? Denied. It turns out they also need proof of paternity. What about the cherry on top? Her new boyfriend has dumped her. Apparently, once my lawyer showed those vacation images in court, the guy began doing the arithmetic. He discovered he wasn't the only one she had been with, and he wasn't sure he was the father anymore. I can only imagine the discourse. A few months following the trial, I received a text from an unknown number. Jessica, I hope you're happy. I glanced at it for a second before typing back. I am, thanks for asking. I then blocked the number. I did not need to hear from her again. She'd spent years attempting to manipulate, control, and milk me for everything I owned. But now she was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I was liberated. My mother-in-law and sister called me a freeloader while I secretly paid their bills. They threw me and my son out. They'll regret it. My life was rather straightforward until Jake came around. I worked as a fitness trainer at a neighborhood gym, where I helped others get into shape. It kept me busy enough not to think about the absence of drama in my personal life. Everything changed the day Jake stepped into my gym. Hey, I'm looking to switch up my routine. Got any killer moves to start with? He inquired, his tone light but his stare serious. I gave him a once-over. He wasn't your typical rookie, unsure which machine to try first. No, he appeared to know his way around a gym but was looking for something more. Sure, I said, directing him to a set of weights. Let's see what you've got. The initial session turned into a week. Then a month. Our casual conversations became longer and more personal. Jake owned a modest family restaurant known for its authentic Italian cuisine. It's all about the sauce, he'd explain. And nobody makes it like my mom. He spoke about his mother with admiration and frustration, hinting at strong family ties. He surprised me one afternoon as we finished a particularly strenuous workout. Listen, Emily, I've been thinking, how about dinner at my place? You can meet my mom and try that sauce I keep bragging about. I paused, more out of surprise than disinterest. Yeah, why not? I'm curious if it's as good as you claim. Dinner was cozy. The food was fantastic, and the company was surprisingly comfortable. His mother, Anna, smiled warmly and laughed heartily, but her eyes seemed to size me up with each glance. Sophia, his younger sister, also stopped by. Her presence was more prickly, her remarks crisp and rapid. So, Emily, Sophia began, a sneer flashing on her lips as she examined the muscles I had worked so hard to develop. Jake tells us you're quite the fitness guru. Ever deal with hopeless cases, or do you just make the fit fitter? I chuckled and took her jab in stride. I believe everyone has potential. It's all about finding the right motivation. Jake became a continuous presence in my life. He consistently arrived at the gym at the same time and always found an excuse to talk a bit longer. You know, I never believed in fate or any of that stuff, he admitted one evening as we closed the gym together. But meeting you, maybe I was wrong. His statements were a combination of gruff charm and clumsy earnestness. It was refreshing. Despite the niggling voice in my head telling me to take it slowly, I found myself falling for him, hard and quick, like a rookie carrying too much weight without a spotter. One frigid evening, as we went to our cars, he came to a halt and turned to face me, his demeanor solemn. Emily, I'm not good at this fancy talking, and I don't have a smooth line to throw your way, but I like you, a lot. What do you say we make this official? It was abrupt and honest. No games. There will be no delaying the inevitable. That was Jake, straightforward and all in. I grinned as my heart pounded in my chest. I say yes. Let's see where this goes. And with that, I was no longer merely a fitness trainer at the neighborhood gym. I was Jake's girlfriend, and eventually, his wife. Moving into Jake's mother's house shortly after we married was not exactly what I had envisioned for our happily ever after. Jake explained that it was essential to him because of his familial links. But living with his mother, Anna, and sister, Sophia, was difficult from the beginning. They did not hide their unhappiness with my entering the family, and things became more tense by the day. The house was usually busy, Yet I somehow ended up with more than my fair share of responsibilities. After a long day at the gym, I'd go home to an endless list of responsibilities. The old washing machine was a nightmare. It broke down so frequently that I half joked it was personal against me. Nobody else seemed to notice or care, particularly Anna and Sophia. I recall one evening after dinner, I was attempting to fix that dreaded machine when I overheard them conversing in the kitchen. "She doesn't even know what she's doing," Sophia said, laughing without lowering her voice. "Watch, she'll flood the basement next." Their laughter rang down the corridor, wounding more than I cared to confess. I bit my tongue and concentrated on the task at hand. It was not just the washing machine. It was everything. From cooking to cleaning, my efforts were simply another source of fun for them. Cooking was the worst. Italian cooking was revered in this household, and my attempts were deemed blasphemous. I tried to follow Anna's recipes exactly, but nothing seemed to work. Sophia lurked in the doorway one night while I was struggling with a seemingly simple spaghetti recipe. "Is that supposed to look like that?" she inquired, a sneer crossing her lips. "It's nothing like Mom's." I gritted my teeth and stirred the sauce, which wouldn't thicken. "Well, I'm trying my best here." Sophia snorted. "Maybe your best isn't good enough. Did you ever think of that?" I wanted to respond, to defend myself. But what was the point? Everything would remain the same. Jake appeared to shrink slightly whenever his sister or mother chastised me. He never stood up for me. His quiet was as audible as their laughter. "Hey, Emily, just leave it," Jake said quietly later, attempting to avoid confrontation. "It's not worth it." Dinner time was a hassle. I had arranged the dishes on the table in the hopes of having a tranquil supper, but it seemed like I was sitting in a lion's den. "You know, in Italy, they'd probably ban you from the kitchen for this," Anna joked as she tried my food, and the others laughed along. "Yeah, maybe stick to what you know, gym stuff," Sophia would say, distributing the salt as if it were a peace gift I did not deserve. I'd nod, grin, and swallow the hurt, my irritation simmering like the sauce that never worked out. Living with Jake's family made each day feel like a war I was unprepared for. As my pregnancy progressed, the housework, which already felt like it was all on me, became increasingly stressful. Instead of receiving assistance or sympathy from Anna and Sophia, I sensed their hostility grow worse. One afternoon, I attempted to sweep the living room while moving slower than normal due to my increasing tummy. Anna strolled in, regarded me for a bit, and then gave out a sigh of displeasure. "Emily, you missed a spot over there, and look at how slow you're moving. This house is going to fall apart at this rate," she observed, pointing to a corner I hadn't yet arrived at. I straightened up, feeling a tightness in my back. "I'm doing the best I can, Anna. It's a bit harder with the baby," she scoffed, shaking her head. "In my time, we didn't let a little thing like pregnancy slow us down. You need to toughen up." The lack of sympathy hurt, and I bit my tongue to avoid snapping back. Sophia fared no better. Later that day, as I was folding laundry, she entered the room and began flipping through the clothing I had just carefully put. "You do know these aren't folded right, don't you? They should be able to stand up on their own, like how Mom taught us. Here, let me show you again." She tossed the shirt she was holding back into the pile, undoing what I had previously done. Then, with precise movements, she refolded the same garment. I felt my frustration increase. "Sophia, I appreciate the lesson, but I've folded clothes before. I'm not an idiot." She only raised her brow, a cold smile flashing on her lips. Could have fooled me. But hey, if you're okay with being mediocre, who am I to argue? Her words felt like a slap. For a time, I just stood there, watching her make my efforts appear futile. It was the same with cooking. Every dish I tried was met with criticism or downright ridicule, especially if I tried to create something Italian. One evening, I decided to try again, this time with a basic pasta dish that I believed I had nailed. Sophia arrived into the kitchen just as I was stirring the soup. "What's that supposed to be?" she inquired, staring into the pot with a doubtful expression. "It's spaghetti carbonara." "I thought it might be nice for dinner," I added, hoping for a difference in her typical gruff tone. She took a fork, tossed some pasta on it, and tasted it with an exaggerated distaste. "Nice? This is what you call nice? I wouldn't feed this to the dog. It's all wrong." I banged the pot's lid down slightly harder than necessary. "Well, it's what's for dinner. If you don't like it, you're welcome to make something else." Every day, the tension in the house increased, and Jake's absence exacerbated the situation. He was usually at the restaurant, always busy. When he was at home, he avoided all conflicts. When I tried to tell him about how his sister and mother treated me, he would just sigh and say something like, "I know it's tough, Emily, but try to hang in there. They'll warm up to you eventually," Just give it time. After giving birth to my kid, I hoped things would improve. But the truth was quite the contrary. I had gained a significant amount of weight during my pregnancy, which became their new source of mocking. Look at how much she's eating, Anna would chuckle as I tried to fuel myself for breastfeeding. Are you feeding a child or a small army? One day, as I was feeding my kid in the living room, I heard Sophia imitate a cow mooing from the kitchen. The sound cut through me. Tears stung my eyes. It was obvious that they considered me as nothing more than a cow, a utility for my son. I reached a breaking point. The relentless ridiculing and frigid treatment at home became unbearable. I needed a place for myself, where I wasn't just the scolded daughter-in-law or the underappreciated wife. That is when I decided to create my own YouTube channel and Instagram page. One morning, while Jake was at the restaurant and Sophia was out shopping, I put up my old camera in the corner of our tight guest room as my new impromptu gym. I'm doing this, I whispered to myself while adjusting the angle. For me. Not for them. I began filming easy training videos that could be done at home, particularly appealing to moms like myself who couldn't always get to the gym. Talking to a camera felt strange at first, as if I were addressing an audience who was interested in what I had to say. However, it soon became my haven. The first several videos were amateurish, with stiff commentary. Hey everyone, it's Emily here, bringing you a quick 10-minute workout, perfect for busy moms. Let's get started. But as time passed, my follower count increased, as did my confidence. I bought a better camera, watched online courses on lighting and editing, and my little project began to take shape, something wholly mine. Sophia barged into the room one afternoon while I was filming a low-impact exercise sequence for a new video. What the hell are you doing? She said, her gaze jumping from the camera to mine. You turning our home into your personal TV show now? I paused the tape, my heart racing, not from the workout, but from the confrontation. Yes, I am actually. It's something important to me. I need something of my own. Sophia grumbled and looked about with scorn. You think you're some kind of star? Please. Get over yourself, Emily. Her words stung, but I was getting better at dealing with her jabs. Well, it's not like I have your approval for anything else around here. I might as well do one thing I enjoy. Sophia rolled her eyes and marched away. But I didn't stop the camera for long. I resumed my session with a stronger voice than before. My digital profile rose, and so did the prospects. Brands began contacting me, offering free things to include in my movies. Then came the offers to sponsor posts. The first time a brand offered me money to promote their product, I was taken aback. I can't believe they're paying me for this? I said to Jake over dinner one night, eager to express my delight. That's great, Emily, he said, his tone preoccupied by his restaurant issues. Just keep it quiet, okay? Mom and Sophia don't need to know about this. As I returned to the dishes, a notice appeared on my phone. Another comment. Another follower. Another step away from their disdain, and toward something perfectly commonplace yet utterly mine. You're doing amazing, Emily. Thanks for sharing your journey. The comment reads, my channel was no longer just a hobby. It was a thriving business, generating more revenue than Jake's floundering eatery. Soon, I was sending him $2,000 each month to cover household expenses, making it appear like his contribution. Despite my accomplishments, Anna and Sophia continued to treat me as a freeloader. She does nothing around here, just prances about making her silly videos. Anna would spit when she thought I was out of earshot. Sophia repeated her mother's thoughts, adding her own remarks about how I should do more housework, like a real woman. Then Jake's restaurant had a hard period. One evening, he approached me, looking more weary than I'd seen him in months. Emily, the restaurant needs a cash injection, badly. Can you help out? His eyes were begging. I did not hesitate, transferring $10,000 for what he described as urgent developments. He was truly thankful. But it wasn't long before he started begging for more. Just another $55,000 for the bills this month, he remarked quietly, almost humiliated. I consented because I could afford it, and he was still my son's father, whom he adored. But, deep down, I sensed the imbalance deepening. Not just financially, but also in our relationship. Life at Jake's family home was always difficult. But it became awful when Sophia married and brought her husband, Mark, into our home. The house was full. And any sense of solitude or tranquility I had created for myself and my baby evaporated suddenly. Anna, never one to mince words, began calling me lazy and a parasite right in front of my face. You do nothing around here, she'd say, as I struggled to balance my online business and keeping an eye on my baby. Just taking up space. It didn't help that Sophia was expecting her first child, and Anna made it apparent that they wanted more space, hinting that my kid and I were in the way. Soon there'll be another baby in the house, and we can't have freeloaders taking up space, Anna remarked one evening, her gaze drawn to my direction. The atmosphere became cooler, and then, just when things couldn't get much worse, Jake stated that he needed to leave town for a few weeks to handle essential restaurant affairs in another city. He packed up and went, hugging me and our baby goodbye, ignorant to the storm he would leave behind. I attempted to keep things normal by taking my son to school and finishing my videos in the park. However, the day everything actually went apart began like any other, until it didn't. After picking up my son from school, we walked home and spoke about his day. But when we turned the corner, my stomach fell. Our stuff was stacked up on the front doorway, including suitcases, bags of clothes, and even my son's toys. Confused and heartbroken, I rang the doorbell. Anna and Sophia approached the window with chilly looks, unmoved by the sight of a mother and kid stranded outside. They opened the door just enough to speak through, but not enough to let us in. "You need to find somewhere else to stay," Anna stated, her voice stern and uncompromising. I looked at her shocked. "What are you talking about? What about Jake? What will I tell him?" I asked, my voice rising with fear and rage. Sophia chuckled in a nasty, cutting tone. "Tell him whatever you want. He's not here to care, is he?" I frantically tried phoning Jake, but my calls remained unanswered. I had no alternative but to sink deeper into despair and hatred. With no other options, I gathered our belongings and secured a room at a neighboring motel. Sitting in that sterile, darkly lit room with my confused and upset son, I felt something shift inside me. This was more than simply a brief getaway. It was a forced eviction from a life I could no longer bear. I had just finished unpacking our things when my phone vibrated with a new message. It came from Sophia. That was strange. We rarely interacted directly, especially since the fallout. Her message was surprisingly cheerful. "Thought you might want to see what your beloved husband has been up to. A link is also provided." My curiosity piqued. My anxiety increased in my chest. I clicked the link. It redirected me to a social media page with images of Jake. But not on a work trip. The photos showed him cozying up to another woman, having candlelight meals and strolling down the beach with his arms wrapped around her. What is the newest photo's timestamp? Just yesterday. I sat there numb, my phone slipping slightly from my grip as the realization dawned on me. Jake wasn't only away for business. He was living a completely different life, without us. Anger, hot and bitter, welled up inside me. But before I could drown in it, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" My son's sweet voice, filled with sincere compassion, drew me back from the edge. I feigned a smile and scooped him up in my arms. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Just a little tired, that's all." I sat there, staring at the television, a mix of rage and betrayal running through me. All this time, I had been the financial backbone for Jake's faltering restaurant and his ungrateful family, who had essentially discarded me and my baby like garbage. And here he was, leading a double life, at my expense. My phone buzzed nonstop for the next week with Jake's calls. When I eventually spoke, his voice was filled with false worry. "Emily, where are you guys? I heard about what happened. You should come back. We have bills to sort out, and the restaurant needs more funding." His statements made my blood boil, but I maintained a neutral tone. "Sure, Jake, we can discuss it. I'll come by tomorrow." "Great, I really think it's best to handle these things in person," he said, relieved. After hanging up, I felt a chilly determination descend over me. He had no idea I knew about his affair. And he had no idea I had no intention of being the forgiving wife who paid his debts. Tomorrow's meeting would be pivotal, and I was prepared. Dropping up my son at school that morning felt like the quiet before the storm. As I traveled to my mother-in-law Anna's house, where Jake, Anna, and my pregnant sister-in-law Sophia would be waiting, my stomach churned with nervousness and determination. When I arrived, Jake appeared relieved, if not delighted to see me. Unlike Anna and Sophia, whose expressions were filled with dissatisfaction. I quickly dug out the divorce papers from my suitcase and presented them to Jake. As he scanned the paperwork, his eyes widened in disbelief. Anna and Sophia smirked, believing it was their victory. But when I turned to face them, the smirk evaporated instantly. "Don't be too quick to celebrate," I cautioned, my voice calm but sharp. "You've been living off my efforts all this time." Jake's face dropped as he confessed to them. "The restaurant, it isn't doing well. It hasn't been for a long time." Anna and Sophia's joy faded, replaced by horror and rage. They immediately turned on him, their earlier delight transforming into wrath. "You've been keeping this from us?" Anna yelled. Sophia yelled, How could you let this happen? They were angry not at Jake's lies, but at the loss of their financial safety net. Sophia, the arrogant one, scoffed at me. Well, since Jake makes less than you, he'll just have to file for alimony. How's that for justice? Jake perked up and nodded enthusiastically, as if he had just discovered a way to win. I nearly chuckled at the stupidity. That's where you're wrong, Sophia, I corrected, turning to face them both. And Jake, you won't see a cent from me, not for alimony, not for anything. Jake's arrogant grin vanished. What? That's not how this works. Oh, but it is, I answered. Because I know about the affair. His face lost its color. How did you? I tilted my head, pretending innocence. Your sister sent me everything, pictures, dates, and locations. I gestured to Sophia, whose face had turned pale. Thanks to her, I have all the evidence I need. The room burst in turmoil. A flurry of accusations, denials, and frantic explanations flew between them. I let them sink in their own muck for a time before I spoke out. Oh, and one more thing, I said, my voice frigid. I'm taking back everything I paid for. The room became silent. Every appliance, every piece of furniture, everything. As truth dawned on them, their arguments came to an end. I'd previously arranged for movers. Anna and Sophia worried as they began carrying away the refrigerator, washing machine, flat-screen television, and even the beautiful blender I had purchased for them last Christmas. You can't do this? Anna exclaimed, gazing helplessly. We need those things. I caught her gaze, my tone steady but not harsh. I did this? And I need them too. The movers kept working, cleaning out about half of the house. As I watched them remove the last of my belongings, I felt lighter than I had in years. A weight lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer obligated to this house, these people, or their deception. I returned my gaze to Jake, who appeared little and forlorn, his hopes for quick money dashed. Take care of your sister and mother, Jake. That's your job now, I murmured politely, turning to go. As I walked away, I realized it wasn't just a physical departure. It was my final step out of their deceptive clutches, a step toward regaining my life and ensuring a better future for my son and me. Overall, the divorce was a relief rather than a hardship. I battled for compensation for Jake's adultery and obtained alimony for our son. My lawyer handled everything, making the procedure run as smoothly as possible given the circumstances. Jake's family's lives changed considerably as well. Without my financial backing, his restaurant went bankrupt and couldn't survive. The family house was sold to pay off debts, demonstrating their unsustainable lifestyle. Meanwhile, Anna and Sophia scrambled to contact me, their messages a combination of apologies and desperate begs for aid. Despite everything, I couldn't allow myself to be drawn back into their madness. I immediately blocked their numbers. Sophia's husband abandoned her, and now the entire family, Jake, his mother, his sister, and her child, is crowded into a small rented apartment. They created this difficult position for themselves. In contrast, life for me and Alex is improving. We've fallen into a comfortable routine in our own rented flat, which feels more like home every day. My YouTube channel and Instagram page have taken off, resonating with women, particularly new mothers, who are striving to get back into shape. Seeing the beneficial impact of my work has sparked a new idea. Create online fitness courses designed exclusively for postpartum mothers. I'm enthused about the possibilities and the opportunity to assist others who have been in my position. There was a lot to accomplish, but for the first time in a long time, the future appeared bright and full of possibilities. I had a deep feeling of serenity here, in our tiny sanctuary, with my son's laughing booming off the walls. We had made it through the storm. And now was our turn to shine. My jealous sister accused me of being a gold digger and tried to ruin my boyfriend's career. My parents took her side as always. Hello, everyone. I don't know where to start. I suppose I've always been the other sister. My name is Lindsay, and I'm 29 years old. I grew up in the shadow of my older sister, Melanie, who is now 34. It feels like my entire life has been spent trying to measure up to her, but I never could, at least not in my parents' eyes. Melanie has always been the golden child. I recall as a child seeing how easily everything appeared to fall into place for her. She was the star of every school play, the captain of her soccer team, and the straight-A student who my parents couldn't stop talking about. Meanwhile, I was simply Lindsay, the quiet one. The girl who enjoyed drawing in her sketchbook but did not shine in the ways that mattered to them. It wasn't as if I hadn't tried. I put myself into art because it was the one thing I thought I was good at. But even that wasn't enough. I recall one particular day well. During a parent-teacher conference, My middle school art instructor informed my mother that I had true talent and that if I worked hard enough, I might be able to receive a college scholarship. I felt very proud and excited. But when we arrived home, my mother replied, "That's nice, honey, but it's not like art is a real career. Melanie's already studying for the SATs. Maybe focus on something practical." This shattered me. I was 12. I did not wish to be practical. I wanted them to be proud of me, even if it was for reasons other than Melanie. But the favoritism did not end there. My parents gave Melanie every possible benefit. They paid for her piano lessons, individual tutoring, and pricey summer camps, which she didn't appear to like. When it came to me, however, the funding was tight, or so they claimed. I asked for painting lessons, even cheap ones at the community center, but they always answered, "No, we just can't afford it right now, Lindsay." They did, however, manage to finance a new car for Melanie when she reached 16. Regarding that car, here's a story that still makes my blood boil. On my 16th birthday, I convinced myself that this was finally my time. If Melanie gets a car, maybe they'll surprise me with one as well. Instead, I received a sweater. A sweater. I'm not ungrateful. I understand not every child gets a car. But what about the kicker? Melanie arrived home from college with a flat tire. And guess who got to wait and watch my father spend hours mending it while my birthday cake lay untouched on the counter? Happy birthday to me. And it's not simply the material aspects that sting, it's the emotional neglect. My mother constantly praised Melanie, saying things like, "You're so beautiful, you're so smart, and you're going to do amazing things." I can't remember the last time she said that to me. I was ecstatic to get my first job at a tiny graphic design agency. But my mother's response was, "That's nice, but when are you going back to school?" You know, Melanie got her master's degree. I tried talking to my father about it once. He's quieter than my mother and more passive. I asked him why it seemed like they loved Melanie more than me. He groaned, looked uneasy, and continued. "We don't love her more, Lindsay. She just needs us more." What the heck does that even mean? Is she in more need of them? She had everything handed to her. If anyone required assistance, it was me. As I became older, the gap between us widened. Melanie went on to greater and better things, an Ivy League degree, a high-paying job in finance, and a sparkling engagement ring from her equally beautiful fiancé. And me, I felt stuck. My art career didn't take off as I had hoped. And every time I saw my folks, they'd say, "So, what's next?" As if what I'd done so far wasn't enough. One of the most humiliating experiences occurred last Thanksgiving. Melanie and her fiancé, Jason, came over for supper, and my parents went all out, prime rib, fine wine, the works. I brought a pumpkin pie that I had made myself, which I was very proud of considering I am not much of a cook. When I placed it on the table, my mother gave me a tight little smile and said, "Oh sweetie, that's nice, but Melanie brought a cheesecake from that bakery downtown. Everyone loves their desserts." Guess which one was devoured first? Melanie not only receives all of the adulation, but she also appears to ignore it. She pretends not to notice the partiality, but I believe she enjoys being the center of attention. Years ago, I tried to confront her about it. I told her it was unfair that Mom and Dad treated us differently. She stared at me with wide-eyed innocence and said, "Lindsay, you're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad love us equally." Then she turned around and uploaded a picture on Instagram with the remark, "My parents are the best," over a shot of the new watch they bought her just because. I feel as if I've been gaslit my entire life. Every time I try to express my feelings, I am met with either denial or sympathy. "You're overreacting, Lindsay," or, "Oh, you poor thing," as if I were a frail little flower incapable of handling her feelings. It is exhausting. I've been growing increasingly distant from my family. I stopped coming to family gatherings and called my mother solely to learn about Melanie's recent successes. I've been focusing on my painting again, attempting to rekindle the passion I had as a child before their relentless comparison drained everything from me. But it's hard. No matter how much I try to remove myself, that voice in the back of my head continually screams, "You'll never be good enough." I guess what I'm wondering is, am I crazy for feeling this way? Is it inappropriate to want my parents to see me for who I am, rather than who I am not? Or am I doomed to live the rest of my life in Melanie's shadow? After years of feeling stuck, I eventually discovered what I considered to be a nice place. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer, gradually developing a portfolio that I was proud of. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I adored it. For once, I felt in charge of my life, free from incessant comparisons to Melanie. That's when I met Zach. It was a random meeting at a small business exhibition that I attended to network. I was standing awkwardly near a kiosk, browsing through leaflets, when he approached me. He was tall, with dark hair that had just the proper amount of gray at the temples, and he exuded effortless confidence, which I noticed straight away. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he replied, smirking. I laughed, slightly ashamed. "Is it that obvious?" He presented himself as Zach, the founder of a modest but thriving technology startup that creates software for small businesses. As we talked, I discovered that he was 36, self-employed, and had created his business from the ground up. Zach, unlike many of the folks I'd met at these occasions, was neither pretentious or overbearing. When I explained about my business, he listened and asked questions about my design process and the types of clients I dealt with. It felt refreshing. We kept in touch for a few weeks. Zach was more than just nice and charming. He was intelligent, ambitious, and truly interested in what I had to say. He asked me to create some branding materials for his company, and working with him was fantastic. He treated me as an equal, which was unusual for me after being dominated by Melanie for so long. When Zach and I started dating, it felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I felt recognized, not as Melanie's sister or the less successful daughter, but as Lindsay. He wasn't concerned about my family dynamics or the baggage I carried. He cared for me. Of course, Melanie had to spoil it. At first, my parents appeared cautiously enthusiastic about Zach. They loved his success, though my mother couldn't help but make snarky remarks like, "Well, he's a bit older, isn't he?" Or, "I hope he's serious about you." Melanie, on the other hand, despised him from the start. I should have seen it coming. Melanie delights on being the center of attention, the one everyone envies. Zach's accomplishments made her feel threatened. She couldn't believe I'd found someone who was not only nice and helpful, but also extremely accomplished in his own right. So, in classic Melanie flair, she sought to instigate drama. It began quietly. Melanie mentioned during a family meal how handy it was that I met Zach while working on a project for him. "So, did you land the guy and the client?" she joked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I attempted to shrug it off, but the inference was clear. She assumed I was just dating Zach for his money. Things swiftly escalated after that. Melanie began spreading tales throughout our family, claiming that Zach was some type of sugar daddy. She even told my parents that I was exploiting him to escape my dismal career. "I just think Lindsay's rushing into things," she'd say, pretending to worry. "It's not like she's ever dated someone like Zach before. You have to admit, it's a big step up." What is the worst part? My parents believed her. My mother confronted me one night after dinner. "Lindsay," she asked, her tone concerned, "are you sure Zach is the right man for you? He's so established. I just don't want you to get hurt if this doesn't work out." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Zach and I are happy. Why can't you just let me have this?" Mom hesitated. "It's just..." Melanie mentioned some things. "Of course, she did," I added. "Because Melanie can't stand it when the attention isn't on her." I stormed out that night, but the damage had already been done. The seeds of mistrust had been sowed, and no matter how much I defended myself, it seemed as if my family had already made up their minds. The rumors did not end with my family. Melanie began sharing them around mutual friends. People I hadn't spoken with in years. One day, I received a phone call from Sarah, an old high school classmate I hadn't spoken with in years. "Hey, Lindsay," she said nervously. "I just wanted to check in. I heard some things about Zach and wanted to make sure you're okay." "Wait, what things?" I inquired, puzzled. Sarah hesitated. "Well, Melanie mentioned that Zach might be, controlling. She said you've been spending all your time with him and barely talking to your family anymore. I just wanted to make sure everything's all right." I was infuriated. "Sarah, that's not true. Zach is nothing like that. Melanie's just..." I paused, recognizing there was no use in explanation. Melanie had already caused harm. When I challenged her about it, she claimed to be the victim. "I was just worried about you," she explained, wide-eyed and innocent. "I didn't mean for it to get blown out of proportion. You know how people love to gossip. You're the one who started the gossip," I yelled. "Why can't you just be happy for me for once?" Melanie didn't care. She never does. All she cared about was bringing me down and keeping me in the shadow, where she believed I belonged. Throughout it all, Zach was my rock. "Lindsay," he remarked one night as we sat on his couch, "you don't owe anyone an explanation for our relationship. Not your parents, not Melanie, not anyone. The people who really care about you will see the truth." He could see how much it was hurting me and did everything he could to encourage me. I wanted to believe him, but it was difficult. Melanie's falsehoods made me feel increasingly lonely. Even some of my closest friends became distant, as if they didn't know what to think. It seemed like I was waging a lost battle, while Melanie was winning. But Zach was correct in one thing. Those who genuinely cared about me stood by my side. My best friend Emily was among them. When she heard what Melanie was saying, she quickly called me. "Lindsay, this is ridiculous," she said. "Anyone who knows you knows you're not that kind of person. Melanie's just jealous. She can't stand that you're happy." Hearing those words meant more to me than I could convey. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. Zach, for his part, refused to be swayed by the reports. If anything, they only strengthened us. He saw through Melanie's tactics and refused to allow her harm our relationship. "She can say whatever she wants," he told me. "At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is us." He was correct. Melanie could spread as many stories as she wanted, but she couldn't take away what Zach and I had created together. For the first time in my life, I wasn't simply Lindsay, the other sister. I was Lindsay, the woman who had found love and happiness despite everything Melanie had thrown at her. I used to believe that things couldn't get worse following Melanie's initial rumors about Zach. I was mistaken. Melanie wasn't simply out to ruin my family's opinion of me. She launched her campaign on social media, dragging my name through the mud for all to see. It began softly, as many of Melanie's shenanigans did. She shared a photo of herself and her husband Jason, in front of their huge suburban home. The headline read, "It's amazing what you can achieve with hard work and dedication. Some of us don't need shortcuts." I realized it was about me. The timing was absolutely great. Zach and I had just shared photos from a weekend trip to Napa Valley, which Melanie would have undoubtedly seen. I attempted to ignore her posts, but they got more pointed. A few days later, another photo showed her holding an expensive handbag with the message, "Bought this with my own money, because, you know, some of us don't rely on others to fund our lifestyles." The worst one, however, was a photo of her standing in her garden with a smug smile, holding a coffee cup that read "Girl Boss." The caption, "It's amazing how some people will do anything for a free life." Her friends and acquaintances chimed in, some even tagging me directly in their replies. I was upset, but I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her publicly in order to defend myself, but Zach urged me otherwise. "She's baiting you," he remarked. "If you respond, you're giving her exactly what she wants." He was correct, of course, but that didn't make things any easier. Every time I opened my social media, there it was. Her smug expression, passive-aggressive captions, an army of accomplices. It felt like she was waging war against me, and I didn't even have a weapon to defend myself. A few weeks later, things escalated during a family meal. My parents had invited everyone over for what they called a relaxing evening. I should have known better. Nothing about being in the same room with Melanie could possibly be relaxing. Melanie was on edge from the time Zach and I stepped in. She welcomed us with a phony smile and an overly bright, "Oh, hi, you too." But her tone was tinged with sarcasm. She hardly acknowledged Zach, instead concentrating her entire attention on Jason, making a huge deal of questioning him about his career, their forthcoming vacation, and his plans to remodel their already exquisite kitchen. Dinner began uneventfully enough. My mother had prepared one of her hallmark dishes, roast chicken with all the fixings, and the discussion was primarily small talk. However, Melanie, ever the limelight seeker, felt it was time to stir the pot. She leaned back in her chair, whirling her wine glass like a villain from a soap opera, and said, "You know, it's funny. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and she mentioned how some people are living the dream of all money hunters." The table became silent. My father coughed awkwardly. My mother gave Melanie a warning glance, but she disregarded it. "I mean," she continued, her gaze riveted on mine. "Imagine finding someone who's willing to pay for everything. Your vacations, your lifestyle, even your career. Must be nice, right?" Zach stiffened alongside me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I wouldn't let her see me crack. "Are you trying to say something, Melanie?" I inquired, keeping my voice as quiet as I could. "Oh no, of course not," she responded innocently. "I'm just making an observation. Some people have all the luck." "Luck has nothing to do with it," Zach interrupted, his voice low but forceful. "Lindsay works hard, and she doesn't need to rely on anyone to support her." Melanie smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she does. I mean, graphic design is such a stable and lucrative career path. I'm sure you don't help out at all, right?" "Enough." My mother's voice sliced through the tension like a dagger. "Melanie, stop it. This isn't appropriate." But Melanie wasn't done. She slammed her glass down with a bit too much vigor, the sound reverberating around the room. "I'm just being honest, Mom. Isn't that what we're supposed to do as a family? Be honest with each other? I could not handle it anymore. I sprang up so rapidly that my chair almost crashed over. Honesty? You wouldn't know honesty if it hit you in the face. All you know how to do is tear people down because you can't stand it when the spotlight isn't on you. Lindsay, don't, Zach murmured calmly, placing his hand on my arm. But I was beyond the point of caring. Do you know what your problem is, Melanie? I asked, my voice quivering with wrath. You can't stand the fact that someone else might actually be happy for once. You thrive on making other people feel small because that's the only way you can feel big. Melanie's face flushed hot, but she did not answer. My father said something about everyone needing to calm down, but I didn't want to hear his half-hearted attempts at mediation. I grabbed my coat and turned to face Zach. Let's go. We went without saying anything, the tension in the room so heavy that I felt like I was suffocating on it. I burst into tears as soon as we arrived at the car. I can't do this anymore, I wept. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when she's destroying my life. Zach drew me into his arms, his words calming. You don't have to. You don't owe her or anyone else in your family anything. You've worked hard for what you have, and you don't need to justify it to anyone, least of all Melanie. He was correct, of course, but as much as I wanted to wipe Melanie out of my life entirely, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. She was more than just my sister. She was my parents' darling, the golden child. Cutting her out would also mean cutting them out, which I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The next few days were a jumble of emotions, rage, despair, and frustration. I blocked Melanie on all social media platforms, not wanting to see any more of her passive-aggressive posts, but the damage had already been done. Friends and acquaintances who had seen her posts were immediately asking questions, their tone tinged with thinly veiled condemnation. You're not actually dating him for his money, are you? One of them questioned me directly. No, I snapped. I'm not. But the stories lingered, and Melanie's shadow became larger than ever. No matter how hard I tried to get away, it felt like she was always one step ahead, ready to drag me down. After that horrible family meal, I knew I couldn't keep putting myself through Melanie's games. Every interaction with her seemed like a landmine about to detonate, and I was done falling into her traps. Zach and I talked about it, and we both agreed I needed to take a step back for my own sanity. I needed to set some boundaries, even if it meant missing family occasions. The first test came a few weeks later, when my parents said they would be having a cookout. It'll be fun, my mother stated over the phone, her tone far too enthusiastic. Jason and Melanie are coming, and you can bring Zach. We haven't seen you two in ages. I paused. I don't think that's a good idea, Mom. She heaved an impatient sigh that made me feel like a troublesome child. Oh, Lindsay, don't be like this. It's just a little barbecue. You're not still upset about what Melanie said, are you? Are you still upset? I asked incredulously. Mom, she basically accused me of being a gold digger in front of the whole family, and that's not even mentioning all the crap she's been posting online. Mom dismissed it with a giggle. Oh, honey, you know how Melanie is. She doesn't mean half of what she says. You two just need to talk things out. No, Mom, I replied firmly. What I need is for her to stop attacking me every chance she gets. Until that happens, I'm not going to any event where she's present. There was a prolonged pause. Finally, she remarked. Well, I think you're overreacting, but if that's how you feel. It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but she didn't go any further. Zach and I spent the weekend hiking instead, enjoying the solitude and quiet of the trails away from Melanie's toxic presence. But my absence was not unnoticed. A few days later, my father called, his tone pleasant but with that hint of disappointment I'd heard so many times before. Lindsay, your mother told me you didn't come to the barbecue because of Melanie. Is that true? Yes, Dad, I said, bracing myself for the scolding I knew was coming. Lindsay, he replied. She's your sister. Families fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean you just walk away. Your mom and I raised you both better than that. I felt a knot form in my throat. Dad, this isn't just a fight. This is years of Melanie tearing me down, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I have to protect myself. He exhaled. I get that you're upset, but don't let this destroy the family. You two need to find a way to work things out. Destroy the family? The word struck me like a punch in the gut. It was the same guilt trip strategy my parents had used throughout my life to keep me in line, and I was sick of it. I'm not the one destroying the family, Dad, I murmured, my voice trembling. If you want to blame someone, blame Melanie. However, he did not. He never would. Over the next 2 months, I stuck to my decision. I denied any invitations from my parents to events attended by Melanie. Let us know when you're hosting something without Melanie, I'd propose. They never did. Every time I turned them down, they'd say I was being harsh, Melanie was doing her best, and I was letting a minor misunderstanding destroy everything. What they didn't realize, or refuse to recognize, was that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of conduct that had persisted throughout my life, and I was not going to continue submitting myself to it merely to keep the peace. The distance from my family was difficult, but it also allowed me to focus on myself. I immersed myself into my business, accepting new clients and developing my portfolio. Zach was my biggest supporter, always there to encourage me and remind me of my worth when I was doubting myself. Slowly but steadily, I began to feel like I was reclaiming my identity. Lindsay, the artist, the partner, the woman who did not want her family's approval to be complete. Melanie, on the other hand, was not satisfied with the status quo. One afternoon, my dearest friend Emily called me. "Hey, have you seen Melanie's latest post?" she inquired, her tone tinged with alarm. "No," I replied, my stomach sinking. "What did she do now?" Emily hesitated. "She posted this picture from your parents' anniversary dinner, and the caption said, 'Some of us actually show up for our family. Watch your family first.'" I groaned. "Unbelievable. She can't stand that I'm not playing her game anymore, so now she's trying to make me look like the bad guy." Emily sighed. "I know it's hard, but don't let her get to you. You're doing the right thing by setting boundaries." I wanted to believe her, but guilt was gnawing at me. Every time I saw a picture of my family without me, every time I heard my mother's disappointed tone or my father's angry sighs, I felt as if I had failed them. It didn't matter that I was defending myself. Part of me still craved their acceptance and validation. The breaking point occurred a few weeks later, when my parents asked Zach and me to supper. "It'll just be the four of us," Mom said. "No, Melanie, no drama." I reluctantly agreed. I wanted to believe they were finally listening to me and understanding where I was coming from. However, when we arrived, there was a fifth place setting on the table. My heart fell. "Please tell me that's not for who I think it is," I requested. Before my mother could respond, the doorbell rang. Melanie strolled in moments later, smiling. "Oh, Lindsay, I didn't know you'd be here," she remarked, her tone full of feigned astonishment. I turned to my parents. "Are you serious? You lied to me." "Lindsay, please," Mom begged. "We just thought if you two spent some time together, you could work things out." I shook my head, tears of fury and betrayal welling up in my eyes. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not the problem here." "She is." Melanie gasped and clutched her chest in mock indignation. "Me? What did I do?" I could not handle it anymore. "You know exactly what you did, Melanie. You've spent our entire lives tearing me down, and I'm done pretending it's okay. I'm done being your punching bag." She smirked. "Oh, please. You're so sensitive, Lindsay. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim all the time, people would actually take you seriously." That was it. I grasped Zach's hand and turned to face my parents. "If you can't respect my boundaries, then I can't be part of this family anymore." My mother started to cry. My father seemed to want to say something but didn't know what. Melanie simply stood there, looking as smug as ever. As we walked out, Zach squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he replied. I wanted to believe him, but all I could feel was grief. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, life was peaceful. Zach and I had discovered a rhythm together, a kind of sanctuary away from the drama that my family was continually causing. I was still separated from my parents and Melanie, but I felt no remorse. I'd spent too much of my life bending over backwards to please them. I was now focused on my own happiness. When Zach proposed, their happiness increased tenfold. We were on vacation and stayed at a beautiful home on a remote island. It was the kind of paradise I could only imagine. Pristine beaches, lush foliage, and a villa straight out of a tourist brochure. Zach planned the entire vacation as a surprise for our 2-year anniversary. He urged me to pack my luggage but didn't tell where we were going, just that it would be exceptional. The proposal took place on the second night, following a romantic dinner on the balcony facing the ocean. As the sun sank, the sky turned orange and purple, and the sound of waves breaking against the shore provided the ideal backdrop. I was savoring the scenery when Zach abruptly dropped to one knee, clutching a little velvet box in his palm. "Lindsay," he replied, his voice steady but full of passion. "The last 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me what it means to truly love and be loved. I hope to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I was so overwhelmed that I could barely speak. As I nodded, tears flowed down my cheeks, and my heart felt like it was about to burst with excitement. "Yes," I eventually managed to say. Yes, of course, I'll marry you. The ring was stunning, a basic yet elegant design featuring a single diamond that glittered like the stars above us. It wasn't gaudy or over the top, and I appreciated that Zach had chosen something so perfect for me. We spent the remainder of the evening partying, sipping champagne beneath the stars, and fantasizing about our future together. For once, I felt like my life was mine, not defined by my family's expectations or Melanie's shadow, but by the love and pleasure I'd created with Zach. When we returned from our trip, we began arranging the wedding. Neither of us wanted anything large or ostentatious. We both preferred closeness over show. We settled on a small ceremony with only 25 guests, close friends and family members who had been supportive of our relationship since the beginning. Melanie was clearly not on the guest list. My parents' invitation required a more hard decision. I struggled with it for weeks, divided between wanting them to be there and fearing the drama they may cause. Finally, I decided to accept them, but I made it clear that if they brought Melanie as a guest, they would be instantly uninvited. This is my day, I informed them honestly. I'm not going to let her ruin it. The site was ideal, a quaint winery secluded in the countryside, with rolling hills and scenic views. The wedding would be held in an outside garden, followed by dinner and dancing beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Zach and I collaborated closely with Amanda, a wedding planner who helped us bring our vision to life. She was a godsend, keeping things on track and making sure no details were neglected. Of course, Melanie learned about the wedding. I'm still unsure how. My parents said they didn't tell her, but I wouldn't put it past them to accidentally reveal it. Once she knew, the sabotage began. It all started with rumors. Melanie called up extended family members who hadn't been invited, explaining that I had purposefully excluded them because I thought I was too good for the family. She informed one cousin that the wedding was being held at a fancy, costly vineyard and that I was wasting Zach's money like it was going out of style. She's always been jealous of me, Melanie allegedly stated. This whole wedding is just her way of trying to one-up me. I learned about the rumors from my Aunt Karen, who contacted me one evening, apparently disturbed. Is it true, Lindsay, that you are not inviting anyone from your family except then your parents? She asked. Aunt Karen, that's not true, I exclaimed, my wrath boiling over. We are having a simple wedding, that is all. It's not about excluding somebody. It's about maintaining intimacy. Well, Melanie's been saying some things, she admitted. I just thought you should know. I thanked her for the heads up and hung up, my hands quivering in anger. Zach spotted me pacing the living room and grumbling under my breath. She's unbelievable, I complained. She's spreading lies about me to the entire family just because I didn't invite her to my wedding. Zach wrapped his arms around me, his calm presence grounding me. Let her say whatever she wants, he muttered. The individuals that matter understand the truth. Do not let her steal your joy. He was correct, of course, but it didn't make things any easier. Melanie's rumors sparked a chain reaction, and I soon found myself getting calls and messages from distant relatives demanding to know why they hadn't been invited. It was exhausting, but I wouldn't let it impede my plans. When the wedding day arrived, I was a bundle of jitters. Not because of Melanie. Amanda had informed me that the venue had strict security measures in place and that no unauthorized guests would be admitted, but because I wanted everything to be flawless. As I stood in the bridal suite, looking in the mirror, I felt a sense of peace come over me. My gown was simple but lovely, a flowing A-line with delicate lace embellishments and a soft champagne color. My dearest friend Emily stood alongside me, smiling as she adjusted my veil. You look incredible, she replied. Zach's going to lose it when he sees you. The ceremony was all I had imagined it would be. As I came down the aisle, my heart leaped when I saw Zach waiting for me, his eyes full of love and pride. We exchanged meaningful and highly personal vows, and when we said I do, there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. The reception was equally as wonderful. The meal was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the dance floor was filled with laughing and happiness. My parents behaved appropriately, though I could sense my mother was uncomfortable without Melanie. Still, for once, the spotlight was on me. Not on family conflict or sibling rivalry, but on the love Zach and I shared. As the night came to a close, I found myself sitting with Emily and a few other close friends, reminiscing on everything that had led up to this point. You did it, Emily remarked, raising her glass in toast. You stuck up for yourself and achieved pleasure. That is what matters. Following the wedding, Zach and I hoped Melanie would finally leave us alone. But of course, that was too much to ask. Instead, her toxic behavior worsened. She began spreading even more ridiculous accusations, not only about me but also about Zach. According to Melanie, Zach had a history of dominating his partners, had been sued for fraud in the past, and was using his fortune to influence me into separating from my family. Of course, it was all falsehoods, but the sheer arrogance of it was terrible. The worst aspect was that her lies began to damage Zach's professional reputation. One of his business associates, Mark, called him to inquire about the lawsuit. At first, Zach was perplexed. But when Mark mentioned that he had learned about it through a mutual acquaintance, it was evident that Melanie was the source. This was the last straw for Zach. He was not the kind to exacerbate situations unnecessarily, but this wasn't simply petty family drama anymore. It was defamation, and it was beginning to harm his livelihood. Zach decided to pursue legal action. He contacted his lawyer, Andrea, a no-nonsense woman who had handled his business contracts for many years. Andrea acted quickly when Zach explained the problem. "We'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately," she told me. "If she doesn't comply, we'll escalate to a defamation lawsuit." The letter was mailed a few days later. I hadn't seen it, but Zach assured me that it was clear and left no room for interpretation. It detailed all of Melanie's fraudulent assertions, requested that she stop making defamatory statements immediately, and warned that failing to comply would result in legal action. Zach's tone when discussing it was calm but forceful. "This isn't just about us, Lindsay," he told me. "People like Melanie won't stop unless forced to. She needs to learn that her actions have repercussions." Melanie did not take it well, as one could expect. The day after she received the letter, she called my mother in tears, accusing Zach of bullying her and attempting to destroy her life. My mother, of course, called me right away, her voice filled with guilt-tripping concern. "Lindsay, what is happening?" "Melanie claims Zach is threatening her with a lawsuit. Isn't that a little extreme?" "She's lying, Mom," I responded, attempting to remain cool. "Zach's not threatening her. He's urging her to stop telling lies about us. She, not him, is ruining people's lives here." "But she's your sister," my mother explained, as if that justified everything. "Can't you two talk it out?" "No, Mom," I snapped. "We tried that, and it obviously didn't work. This is more than simply family conflict, she's breaking the law. If you don't comprehend that, perhaps you're part of the problem." Mom didn't say much after that, but I knew she still supported Melanie. It stung, but by this stage, I was used to it. Melanie's life began to fall apart as the legal pressure increased. Her toxic behavior had alienated many of her friends over the years, and this current incident appeared to be the last straw for a few of them. I heard through the grapevine that numerous people had cut ties with her because they were tired of the continual manipulation and drama she introduced into their lives. Sarah, one of her closest friends, reached out to me. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for ever believing Melanie's lies," Sarah told me. "She's been saying nasty things about you and Zach for years, but now I realize it's all envy. She's toxic, and I can't be around her any longer." It was reassuring to hear, but also heartbreaking. Melanie had always been surrounded by people who adored her, yet her actions had caused her to lose many relationships. Now those bridges were crumbling one by one. She was also struggling financially. Jason, her husband, had lately lost his job, and without it, they were struggling to keep up their extravagant lifestyle. Melanie refused to downsize, claiming they could wait it out, but debts were piling up. Credit card debt, house bills, and the expenditures of living the fashionable lifestyle were catching up with her. Eventually, everything came crumbling down. Jason petitioned for divorce, alleging irreconcilable differences. According to what I heard, he had gotten tired of her continual desire for attention and refusal to accept responsibility for her actions. Melanie's situation deteriorated much further after her divorce. She lost her house and most of her belongings and was forced to move in with my parents. I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. Melanie had spent her entire life putting others down in order to boost her own status, and now she was reaping the benefits. Even yet, it was difficult not to feel some residual anger when I heard my mother discuss assisting Melanie in getting back on her feet. "She's going through a tough time," Mom said one day during one of our few phone calls. "We're just trying to be there for her." "Of course you are," I replied, unable to hide my contempt. "Hasn't she always been your priority?" "That's not fair, Lindsay," Mom exclaimed, protective as usual. "She is your sister. Don't you worry about what happens to her?" "No, Mom," I replied simply. "I care about what happens to me and Zach, and I'm not going to let her drag us down with her." It was a harsh statement, but it was true. I'd spent far too much of my life thinking about Melanie, about how to deal with her drama and how to convince my parents of the harm she was creating. I was now focused on defending myself and the life I had created with Zach. Melanie appeared to fade away from my radar over time. The legal letter had worked. She ceased spreading lies about us, and we were finally at peace. Zach and I immersed ourselves into our profession and our relationship, creating a life founded on love and mutual respect. My relationship with my parents remained tense, but I had come to realize that certain things would never change. Every now and again, I received updates about Melanie from family members. She was still living with my parents and struggling to reconstruct her life. Part of me wondered if she'd learned anything from this, but I doubted it. Melanie is the type of person who rarely changes. Finally, I understood I didn't need her to provide me with closure. I didn't require an apology or recognition of the grief she had inflicted. What I needed to do was move forward, leave the past behind, and concentrate on the future. And this is exactly what I did. It took years, literally years, for my parents to understand what I had been attempting to tell them throughout my life. For as long as I could remember, they had overlooked, justified, and even glorified Melanie's behavior, regardless of how toxic or harmful it was. However, as the consequences of her acts became apparent, they were unable to ignore the reality any longer. I initially noticed the shift when on the phone with my father. Melanie had returned to live with them months before, and I had kept my distance. My parents periodically tried to contact me, but our chats were difficult. This time, however, my father sounded different. Tired and worn out in a way I had never heard before. "How are you doing, Lindsay?" he inquired, his tone surprisingly mild. "I feel like we haven't really talked in a while." "I'm fine, Dad," I replied cautiously. "Busy with work, you know." There was a gap before he sighed. I wanted to say I'm sorry." The words took me off guard. "I'm sorry for what?" "For everything," he said. "For not listening to you and not noticing what Melanie was doing. Your mom and I have discussed how badly we have let you down." I wasn't sure what to say. For years, I had imagined hearing those words, my parents finally admitting the pain they had caused by continuously side with Melanie. But now that the moment had arrived, it seemed strange. "Dad," I asked softly, "what brought this on?" "Melanie," he acknowledged. "Getting her back in the house has been eye-opening, to say the least. The way she speaks to your mother, the way she blames everyone else for her problems, it is tiresome. It has made us realize that we have allowed her to get away with far too much for far too long. Part of me wanted to be vindicated, but largely I felt tired." "I appreciate the apology," I responded. "But it doesn't change what happened." "I know," he replied swiftly. "I do not expect it to. I just wanted you to know that we see it now, and we apologize." A few days later, my mother called. She was never as forthright as my father, but her message was consistent. "We didn't do right by you, Lindsay," she admitted, her voice thick with sorrow. "We ignored Melanie's behavior because it was simpler than confronting it, and as a result, we damaged you. I'm very sorry." Hearing their comments was a step forward, but it did not alleviate years of sorrow. I told them so. "I need time," I explained. "This isn't something I can just forgive overnight." They appeared to understand, and for the first time, they didn't try to force me to move quicker than I was willing to. Not long after, I received a letter. It came from Melanie. Seeing her handwriting on the envelope filled me with dread. I hesitated whether or not to open it, but my curiosity won out. The letter was long, many pages of carefully written text, and as I read it, I couldn't help but feel a range of emotions. Melanie apologized for everything, the lies, the manipulation, and the years spent undermining and making me feel tiny. She stated that envy drove most of her actions, but she did not go into detail about what she was envious of. She apologized for spreading stories about Zach, causing tension at family events, and capitalizing on years of favoritism. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I sincerely apologize. I've done a lot of reflecting, and I realize how toxic I've been, not only to you, but to everyone around me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but maybe someday we can start over." Reading her remarks, I felt a glimpse of something I couldn't quite place, perhaps relief, or maybe optimism. But, overall, I felt cautious. Melanie's past behavior had taught me not to take her comments at their value. A single letter, no matter how passionate, was insufficient to repair the damage she had done. I showed Zach the letter that evening, and we discussed it during supper. "Do you believe she means it?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Maybe. But even if she does, you don't have to accept her back into your life." "I know," I replied. "I just don't want to make the wrong decision. If she is serious, perhaps I should give her a chance." "Giving her a chance doesn't mean jumping back into the relationship as if nothing happened," Zach told me. "You can take it slow, set boundaries, protect yourself." He was correct, of course. If I was going to look into the prospect of restoring a relationship with Melanie, it had to be on my terms. For the following 2 weeks, I tucked the letter away in a drawer, reviewing it sometimes but without answering. I was not prepared, and I did not want to rush into anything. Meanwhile, my parents continued to work on repairing our relationship. They called on a frequent basis, not to guilt or pressure me, but to simply check in. It was a minor but significant difference, and I appreciated it more than I let on. Melanie had recently begun visiting a therapist, according to my mother. I think she's really trying to change, she told me. She's been talking about all the things she wants to do differently, how she wants to make amends. That's good, I remarked warily. But I'm still not ready. I understand, Mom murmured, and for once, she appeared to mean it. Months passed, and I began to experience a feeling of closure, not because I had forgiven Melanie or repaired our relationship, but because I was finally enjoying life on my own terms. I was doing well in my career, my relationship with Zach was better than ever, and I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me. My connection with my parents was gradually improving, and while not ideal, it was a step in the right way. I eventually decided to write Melanie back. My letter was brief and to the point. I thanked her for her apology and acknowledged her efforts, but I made it clear that I required time and distance. If we're ever going to rebuild our relationship, I declared, it has to be on new terms. Terms that respect my boundaries and my well-being. I had no idea how she would react, and honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for her approval or attempting to please her. I was living for myself, which felt liberated. In the end, I recognized that forgiveness isn't about condoning someone's behavior or pretending the damage never occurred. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of that pain and choosing to move forward in a way that preserves your serenity, which is exactly what I plan to do. Life has a tendency of shocking you when you're least expecting it. After years of struggling with my own issues, dealing with family dysfunction, and questioning my worth, I suddenly found myself in a position where everything was fitting into place. Not because life had suddenly become flawless, but because I had stopped striving to meet everyone else's expectations. Professionally, my graphic design career was flourishing. Over the years, I developed a strong portfolio and received praise for my work. The true turning point came when I entered an industry competition with a campaign I produced for a sustainable fashion firm. I had thrown my heart and energy into that project, creating a visual identity that reflected the brand's essence while also pushing the boundaries of what was considered traditional design. When I received an email alerting me that I had won the coveted International Design Excellence Award, I couldn't believe it. At first, I assumed it was an error. I must have read the email a dozen times before it sank in. Winning that prize was more than just a recognition of my abilities. It reminded me that I could achieve greatness on my own terms. The ceremony was held in New York City, and Zach insisted on accompanying me. "This is your moment," he stated proudly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The event was a whirlwind. I strolled into the large ballroom, feeling both nervous and delighted, surrounded by some of the most prominent personalities in the design industry. When my name was called and I walked up to the stage to receive the prize, the cheering was thunderous. I delivered a brief statement thanking those who had helped me along the way and dedicated the award to the mentors who had pushed me to pursue my goal. Following the ceremony, numerous industry executives approached me, including Isabelle Marchand, creative director of a large advertising agency. She said my art was refreshing and bold, and she wanted to collaborate on a new project. That conversation marked the start of a professional connection that would lead to innumerable opportunities for me in the years ahead. Winning the award also spurred me to launch an initiative I had been planning for years. A mentorship program for budding designers. I termed it Creative Futures. The purpose was straightforward: to give information, guidance, and chances for budding designers who didn't have typical entry points into the business. Setting up the application was no easy task. I collaborated with local design schools and industry professionals to secure money through a variety of grants and sponsorships. Zach, my ever-supportive boyfriend, offered to help with the business side of things, connecting me with potential sponsors through his own network. By the time the program began, we had a roster of excellent mentors and a group of bright, hungry students ready to make an impact on the world. The first year of the program was a huge success. One of our mentees, a young woman named Tasha, went on to secure an internship at a renowned design firm, and several others earned scholarships to further their education. Seeing their progress and excitement reminded me why I fell in love with design in the first place. While I was busy developing Creative Futures, Zach was making waves in his own career. His technology company had developed from a modest, scrappy startup to an industry leader. After years of steady growth, Zach decided to expand internationally, establishing offices in London, Tokyo, Sydney, and Berlin. The expansion was a massive undertaking. Zach spent months traveling between locations, engaging with local teams and supervising the establishment of each new office. It was difficult work, but he relished the challenge. "I've always wanted to take this company global," he told me one night during dinner. "And now it's actually occurring. It feels surreal." Despite his tight schedule, Zach always found time for us. Whether it was setting aside an hour for a peaceful supper at home or surprising me with a weekend getaway, he never let work come between us. His ability to strike a balance between ambition and love was one of many reasons I respected him. As our professions progressed, we began to consider what we wanted our lives to be like in the years ahead. We both enjoyed the vitality of the city, but we also desired a retreat, somewhere we could unwind and recharge away from the hustle and bustle. That is how we ended up purchasing the lake cottage. Originally, Zach came up with the idea. He had been looking through real estate ads one evening when he came upon the property, a large mansion on the banks of Lake Tahoe. The house itself was spectacular, with floor-to-ceiling windows providing breathtaking views of the sea, a large terrace ideal for holding events, and a private dock for boating and kayaking. "Take a look at this," Zach replied, sliding his laptop across the table. "I think we should go see it." I scrolled through the photographs, my heart skipping a beat. "It's beautiful," I said. "Do we really need a facility like this?" "It's not about need," Zach said with a smile. "It's about creating an environment in which we can unwind and enjoy life. We've worked hard, Lindsay. I believe we deserve this." A few weeks later, we flew to Tahoe to tour the property. The instant we stepped inside, I knew it was the one. The house felt like a dream come true, luxurious but intimate, with every detail carefully planned. By the time we departed, we'd made an offer. Having the lake house felt like the pinnacle of everything we'd worked toward. We spent our weekends there, having friends for barbecues on the deck, taking long walks down the beach, and relaxing by the fire pit beneath the stars. It became our haven, a spot where we could unwind from the stresses of our hectic lives and simply enjoy each other's company. Looking back on everything we'd done, I couldn't help but be grateful, not only for our achievement, but also for the path that had led us here. The difficulties we had encountered, the lessons we had learned, and the love that sustained us through it all. I knew there were more chapters to our narrative to be written, but for now, I was pleased. Life was not ideal, but it was ours, which was more than enough. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I paid for my parents to go on a luxury trip, but they chose to take my sister instead. After they left, I canceled all the reservations. I treated my parents to a lavish one-week trip to Europe with me. When I picked them up to take them to the airport, they informed me that they had elected to travel with my jobless sister instead of me. My mother grinned. "Your sister needed some rest, so we decided to take her." I did not say anything. When they arrived in Europe, they were treated to a great surprise. "You're late," my mother exclaimed, stepping out onto the porch and lugging her bag behind her. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. It was 6:02 a.m., 2 minutes late. "Mom," I replied, attempting a grin. I got out of the car to help with the baggage, but then I noticed my sister Lauren emerge from the house, carrying her own suitcase. My smile froze. "What's going on?" I inquired, attempting to keep my voice calm. My mother turned to me, her face way too happy for the circumstances. "Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and she really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me? Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved her hand dismissively, as if I had simply brought up something unimportant. "And we're grateful, sweetheart, but you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Lauren needs this right now." Lauren did not even have the decency to appear guilty. She only smirked and shifted her weight to one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she murmured, her voice dripping with phony sincerity. I looked at the two of them, my heart racing in my chest. My father walked out a bit later, avoiding eye contact and handing me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I exclaimed, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip, something for me to share with you." "Well, it still is," my mother replied with a smile. "Just with Lauren instead. Don't make this a big deal, Violet. Your sister really needs a break." My name is Violet, and I've been working extra hours for the past 2 years to provide my parents with an unforgettable vacation. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours. I meticulously organized every detail, down to the last dinner reservation. But as I stood in my parents' driveway, watching my sister enter the rear seat of my car, I realized something I had been ignoring for years. It didn't matter how hard I tried. Lauren was always number one in their eyes. I clenched my jaw, biting back the angry retort that was on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I contrived a stiff smile before opening the trunk. "Let's get going then," I murmured, my voice flat. If they want to prioritize her over me, that's okay. They may accompany her, but I wasn't about to let them enjoy it. Except for Lauren's constant conversation, the drive to the airport was eerily quiet. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that, or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands tightened over the steering wheel as I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to say anything. My mother giggled quietly. "Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit the inside of my cheeks. When we get there. They didn't appear to notice I wasn't a member of that we anymore. At one point, my father cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual." I looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Unusual? That's an interesting way to put it, Dad." He did not respond. He simply shifted uncomfortably in his seat, maybe wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Lauren leaned forward from the back seat, her words harsh. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you, letting me go. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my mouth and forced a tight smile. "Of course, Lauren. Enjoy the trip." By the time we arrived at the airport drop-off zone, my patience had worn thin. My mom hugged me as I helped them unload their luggage. "Thank you for understanding, dear. This means a lot to us and Lauren," my mother explained. I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Lauren smiled as she wheeled her bag to the entrance. "Thanks, Violet. You're the best." I stood there, watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The ride back home was a blur, and I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. "This means a lot to Lauren. You're not mad, right? You're always working so hard." I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations were canceled. Tours were refunded. Airline upgrades were denied. When I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in Paris, and I was done being their doormat. The tightness in my chest began to ease as I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox. If they wanted to take Lauren instead of me, that was fine. But they would not be staying in five-star hotels or taking private tours on my dime. The calls began as soon as their flight landed, and as I unpacked my suitcase, the one I'd packed so meticulously for a trip that was no longer mine, the irony was not lost on me. I hung up my clothes and neatly placed my shoes back on the rack. I groaned, picking up the phone and glanced at the screen, where my mother's name flashed along with multiple missed calls and texts. I unlocked the phone and read through the messages. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me right away." "Violet, this isn't humorous. Fix it now." I couldn't stop myself from laughing. Did they really expect me to sweep in and save the day after what they had done? The phone rang again, this time with a call from Lauren, and I let it ring until she left a voicemail. "Violet, this is so petty," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "We're stuck here because of you. You must contact the hotel immediately and resolve the issue." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. I'd been their fixer for years, smoothing over every mistake and picking up the slack, but not anymore. I eventually decided to respond, if only to stop the torrent of calls. My mother's voice hit me like a tidal wave of hatred as soon as I picked up. "Violet, what have you done? The hotel claims the reservation was canceled, and none of the trips are scheduled anymore." I let her yell for a bit before calmly responding, "I canceled them." After a long, startled silence, she yelled, "Why would you do that?" "Oh, I don't know," I responded, my tone tinged with sarcasm. "Maybe because you chose to accompany Lauren on my trip. You're lucky that I drove you to the airport." "We thought you'd understand," she snapped. "Understand what?" I inquired, my voice rising. "Those years of saving and preparing were irrelevant because Lauren required a break. Did you think my efforts were in vain? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't want to." I hung up before she could react and switched off my phone, tossing it on the couch. The calm that followed was beautiful, and I felt like I could breathe again. If they wanted to prioritize Lauren, fine, but they could work out the rest of the journey without me. The calm lasted barely a day, and the next morning, my phone was humming again with calls and messages, which I initially ignored. I spent the day cleaning the home and catching up on work, but curiosity got the best of me, and by the evening, I had opened my phone and braced myself for the storm of texts. From my mother. Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, your father is upset, and we can't get into any of the hotels you booked. Lauren. You're acting like a child, and I don't see why you're making this such a huge issue. Just repair it already. Finally, from my father. We need to discuss. This isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy, and now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know what to do. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act as if I was the one in the wrong? The next call arrived minutes later, and this time I answered. Violet, my mother said before I could respond. This isn't amusing anymore. We are stranded. Do you know how embarrassing this is? I took a leisurely sip of tea. Embarrassing? Do you think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, organizing every detail, and then being told you aren't even going on the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she said. Lauren needed this more than you. And now she can figure it out, I stated firmly. You have made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Lauren instead of me, that's great. But don't expect me to pay for her vacation. We're family, she said. We don't do this to each other? I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. Lauren's voice rang out in the background crying, Mom, just hang up on her. She is being impossible. That was the last straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone frigid. Oh, you can't, because it isn't your trip. That was my. And now it belongs to nobody. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone. For the rest of the evening, I felt an odd mix of anger and relief. Angry that they'd put me in this situation, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me. The following few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free of the barrage of guilt trips and accusations. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my back porch, enjoying the calm I'd craved for so long. My afternoons were filled with work and catching up on little projects I'd been putting off. Things that reminded me how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands. But on the third day, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned on my phone to find over a dozen voicemails waiting for me, the first few of which were from my mother, who became increasingly upset with each one. Violet, you should call me back right now. This has gone too far. I cannot believe you are doing this. You have embarrassed us. We are your parents. How could you treat us like this? Then followed Lauren's messages, full of the same entitled tone she'd always used. This is so petty, even for you. You are wrecking everything. Just fix it, Violet. Finally, my father's voice, lower but no less pointed. Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can work this out. I paused before listening to my mother's final voicemail, which was lengthy and filled with frustration and exhaustion. Violet, she said. We are back at the airport now. The trip is destroyed, and I hope you are satisfied with yourself. Your sister is upset, and your father and I are beyond disappointed. Call us when you're ready to speak. I deleted the voicemails without responding because I wasn't prepared to talk, and I honestly didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time error, it was the sum of years of them putting Lauren first and expecting me to accept it with a smile. As the hours passed, I reflected on all the times I'd been overlooked or dismissed, every holiday where Lauren's whims dictated the plans, every family gathering where my accomplishments were treated as afterthoughts. This trip had been the tipping point, but the cracks had been forming for years. Grace arrived abruptly that evening, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an evident air of inquiry. I heard about what happened, she continued, placing the coffee on the table. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course, she had. My mother was always adept at enlisting sympathizers to coerce me into obedience. And? I inquired, taking a sip. Grace shrugged, a sneaky smile forming on her face. I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready. I laughed and shook my head. You're the best. No, you're the best, she continued, her tone becoming more serious. Because you finally stood up for yourself. I understand how difficult that is, Violet. Do not let them drag you back down. Her words stayed with me long after she departed. Grace was correct. I'd spent far too long bending over backwards to please people who didn't seem to care about my efforts. It was time to halt that cycle once and for all. By the weekend, I had a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still simmering beneath the surface, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live on my own terms. But, as expected, the silence did not last long. It was Sunday afternoon when I received a phone call from my father, which I decided to answer. "Violet," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Your mother wanted me to call. She believes you will listen to me." "Go on," I murmured, reclining back in my chair. He sighed. "Look, things have gotten out of hand. Your mother is outraged, Lauren is enraged, and everything is simply a mess. But you are better than this." I stiffened, his words eliciting a new wave of rage. "Better than what, Dad? Stand up for myself? I refuse to let you walk all over me again." "That's not what I meant," he answered hurriedly. "It's just that you've always been the sensible one, the one who keeps everything together. This is not like you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're correct. I'm not leaning over backwards to clean up your mess, which is unusual for me." He hesitated, and I thought he might finally understand my point of view, but then he replied, "You're punishing the entire family for one decision. Is that actually fair?" "Fair," I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about fairness? Was it fair that you and Mom thought I wasn't significant enough to join the trip I had planned? Was it right that you replaced me with Lauren, as if I didn't matter?" "That's not what we were trying to do," he added defensively. "We just thought Lauren needed it more." "Of course you did," I yelled. "You always believe she requires more attention, more support, more of everything. And I am always asked to make sacrifices for her. Not anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, and he eventually muttered, "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I said, my voice firm. "I just need you to understand that I'm tired of being an afterthought. From now on, I'll come first. Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I allowed myself to feel everything: anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the beginning of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They could figure out how to clean up their own messes. When my parents and Lauren returned, I was waiting for them in their driveway, sipping coffee and feeling remarkably calm as I watched their cab arrive. Lauren was the first to comment as they came out, dragging their baggage behind them, their expressions filled with tiredness and displeasure. "Well, I hope you're happy, Violet." I arched an eyebrow and remained sitting on the porch swing. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," my mother exclaimed, waving her hand as if to dismiss the whole thing. "We spent the entire week sleeping in dirty hotels and eating bad cuisine since we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't get me started on the tours," Lauren interjected, crossing her arms. "Oh, there weren't any? Do you know how embarrassing it was to arrive and be informed there was no reservation?" I took another sip of coffee, allowing their complaints to wash over me. "Sounds rough," I finally responded calmly. "But you wanted to take Lauren, remember? I'm sure you guys had a terrific bonding experience." "That's not the point," my mother replied, her voice rising. "You knew we couldn't afford everything you'd planned. You set us up for failure." I stood up and placed my mug on the tiny table beside me. "No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something unique that I had been saving for years. You are the ones who decided to cut me out at the last moment." My father eventually spoke up, his tone calmer but no less accusatory. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme." "Was that it?" I asked, folding my arms. "Why should I have paid for a trip to which I had not even been invited? If Lauren needed it so much, you should have organized it yourself. You're lucky I didn't cancel your return flight." Lauren rolled her eyes. "You are so dramatic. It's only money, Violet." "And you're so entitled," I shot back, my patience now fraying. "Do you know how much effort and sacrifice went into preparing that trip? Or do you simply believe that things will emerge for you because someone else takes care of them?" They stood there, surprised and silent for a time. "I've spent years being the responsible one," I said, my voice steady but forceful. "The one who fixes things, prepares things, and ensures everything works well. And you've spent just as long taking everything for granted." "That's not fair," my mother began, but I intervened by raising a hand. "No, Mom. What is unfair is the way you treated me. You chose Lauren above me, like you usually do. So I decided to stop being your doormat. You did not want me on the trip? Fine. But you don't get to reap the advantages of my hard work without me. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. I'm glad you're safe, but don't expect things to return to normal. I'm finished. As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. The drive home from my parents' house felt strangely peaceful. For years, every visit had left me emotionally drained, but this time I felt lighter. I'd finally said everything I'd been holding in, and for once, I wasn't concerned about their reaction. When I got home, I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They'd been so sure I'd fold, that I'd give in like always, but watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how much I'd changed. It didn't matter if they were angry, hurt, or embarrassed, I was done living my life to meet their expectations. The next day, Grace called me. How did it go? She inquired, not bothering with pleasantries. I laughed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. Just as you'd expect. They're outraged, Lauren is pouting, and Mom is probably attempting to guilt me back into line. Grace snorted. Let her try. You have a backbone now, and I'm here to keep it in place. I smiled, appreciative for her unfailing support. Thank you, Grace. I mean it. You've been my rock throughout this. Anytime, she responded, her voice softening. So, what's next for you now that you're no longer the family fixer? That question had been swirling in my head since the confrontation. What was next? For years, so much of my energy had been spent attempting to satisfy my family and earn their approval, but now that I'd let go of that burden, the choices felt endless, and a little terrifying. I don't know yet, I said. But I feel like I get to make the decision. Not them, nor anyone else. Just me. Sounds like the start of something amazing, Grace commented, her voice bright with a smile. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes that felt big in their own way. I redecorated my living room, swapping out my parents' hand-me-down furniture for pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, things I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. And I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of what others might think. Each small step felt like I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd lost until I sat down one evening and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the trip. The canceled reservations stared back at me, and I didn't feel a pang of regret, but rather a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new browser tab and typed solo travel ideas. A few weeks after my parents' return, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the same itinerary I'd planned for them, and it wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally prioritize me. I had never traveled alone before, but as soon as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I'd made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and indulging in meals at charming little cafes. There was no schedule, no one else to consider. Just me and the freedom to do whatever I wanted. One afternoon, while sitting on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always wrapped up in making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted. Learn a new language. Start a small business. Travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew, each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River, and as I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. This trip had been more than just a vacation. It was a turning point. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important. I didn't need it. I was enough just as I was. When I returned home, my parents tried to reach out again, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. Hope you had a nice trip. One text from my mom read. Maybe we can all talk soon. I stared at the message for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to respond, which was fine. This time, it would be on my terms, and I felt proud as I unpacked my luggage and displayed treasures on my shelves. A week after returning from my trip, my mother called, and this time I answered. Hi Violet, she said, her tone strangely soft. How was your trip? It was amazing, I said, keeping my tone neutral. That's nice to hear, she replied, hesitating as if to find the proper words. We've been thinking a lot about what occurred. Perhaps we handled things terribly. The admission astonished me, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook just yet. Poorly. You unexpectedly replaced me on a trip that I had planned and paid for. Poorly is an understatement. I know, she said. Your dad and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you. And Lauren? I asked. Does she feel awful too, or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation? She's upset, says my mother. But I think she knows she could have handled things better. I sighed, resting against the counter. Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's been years of putting her first and expecting me to make up the difference. I am not doing it anymore. I understand, she answered after a time. We will strive to do better. We do not want to lose you. Her comment struck a chord deep within me, but I'd learned not to let guilt influence my decisions. I'm delighted to hear that, I answered. But it will take more than words to heal this. I want to see actual effort, not just apologies. You will, she told me. We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday. After the call, I had a combination of emotions, relief that they were finally admitting their behavior, and skepticism about whether they'd ever change. But when I sat down with my journal that evening, I understood something important. Whether or not they changed was not my duty. Over the following months, I maintained my strict boundaries, responding to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but not going out of my way to solve things or smooth over tensions. Instead, I focused on creating the life I want. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time or energy for, joined a local hiking group, and even started planning my next solo trip. Each step felt like regaining another aspect of myself. One day, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the person who went above and beyond for people who didn't respect me. Instead, I was someone who valued herself, established boundaries, and wasn't scared to stand up for what she deserved. I felt completely liberated. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I sued my parents and received a $1,200,000 settlement for years of favoritism toward my older sister, which deeply affected my life. I sued my parents for manipulating my golden sister and received a settlement of $1,200,000. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in the shadow of my older sister, Elizabeth. She was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, it was clear she was the star of our family. My parents, John and Margaret, were well off and well respected in our community. My father ran a thriving real estate business, and my mother, a retired concert pianist, devoted her time to social events and managing our home. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but inside, it was a different story. Elizabeth was their golden child, and everything about her life reflected that. She was brilliant, charismatic, and excelled at everything she tried, whether it was academics, sports, or music. She outshone everyone, including me. My parents adored her, showering her with praise and attention. Every milestone she reached was celebrated like a major event, complete with elaborate parties and expensive gifts. I was there too, of course, but more as a background character. My own accomplishments, modest as they were, barely registered. It wasn't that I wasn't trying. I did well enough in school and stayed out of trouble, but I didn't shine like Elizabeth. The difference in how we were treated became painfully clear over the years. One Christmas stands out in my mind. I was 8, and Elizabeth was 11. My parents had gone all out with the presents that year. The living room was piled high with gifts, but the centerpiece was a grand piano gleaming under the Christmas lights. Elizabeth had been begging for it for months, and my mother, who still missed her own days as a pianist, had finally caved. They were ecstatic as they unveiled it, going on and on about how Elizabeth would carry on the family tradition. When it was my turn, my dad handed me a small box. Inside was a sketch pad and a set of crayons. "We thought you might like to draw," he said with a smile. I tried to act grateful, but the message was clear. Elizabeth was the star, and I was just there. Things didn't improve as we got older. In school, Elizabeth continued to dominate. She was class president, captain of the cheerleading squad, and eventually valedictorian. Everyone loved her. Teachers sang her praises, and her peers either idolized her or envied her. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. I had a small group of friends, nerdy kids like me who loved video games and comic books, but I was invisible to most of the school. I wasn't bullied exactly, but I wasn't noticed either. One of the most humiliating moments of my childhood happened during a school talent show. I had decided to perform a magic act, something I'd been practicing for weeks. Elizabeth was also in the show, playing a piano piece she had mastered in a matter of days. She went first, And of course, the audience went wild. Her performance was flawless, and she got a standing ovation. Then it was my turn. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped one of my props. A few kids in the audience laughed, and I could feel my face burning. I stumbled through the rest of my act, desperate to just get it over with. Afterward, my parents gave me a half-hearted good job, but their attention quickly shifted back to Elizabeth, who was basking in her glory. Elizabeth wasn't deliberately cruel, at least not usually. After the talent show, she came up to me with that insufferable smile of hers and said, "You were great, Jackson. It's so brave of you to try." Her words stung, not because they were mean, but because they felt so condescending. I hated that I cared so much about her opinion. As we moved into our teenage years, favoritism became impossible to ignore. My parents poured resources into Elizabeth's future, paying for private tutors, expensive summer programs, and any extracurricular activities she showed interest in. I got none of that. When I asked if I could take art classes, my dad shrugged and said, "Maybe next year." A promise that never materialized. Elizabeth's charm extended to the rest of the family as well. Our relatives adored her. Family gatherings turned into endless cycles of "Elizabeth is so talented," and "Elizabeth is going to do great things." I often wondered if they even remembered my name. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your sister." I nodded, biting back the urge to say, "And what about me?" Even as I tried to carve out a path for myself, it felt like Elizabeth was always one step ahead, effortlessly overshadowing me. She didn't just succeed, she excelled. And she did it with an ease that made my own struggles seem pitiful in comparison. I began to resent her, not just for how she was treated, but for how she made me feel about myself. My parents' favoritism wasn't just about praise or attention, it had real consequences. When Elizabeth turned 16, my dad surprised her with a brand new car, a sleek red convertible. She squealed with delight, hugging him and gushing about how it was the best day of her life. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got the keys to our old family sedan, a beat-up station wagon with a busted radio and a sagging roofliner. "It's still a good car," my dad said, as if that made it any less humiliating. Elizabeth went off to an Ivy League university, her tuition fully covered by my parents, who couldn't stop bragging about their brilliant daughter. I, on the other hand, ended up at a state school, working part-time jobs to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. My parents didn't even bother to visit when I moved into my dorm. They were too busy helping Elizabeth set up her new apartment near campus. By the time I graduated, the resentment I felt toward Elizabeth and my parents had hardened into something deeper. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. Every time I saw her with her perfect life and her endless string of successes, it felt like a reminder of everything I wasn't. The first time Elizabeth referred to me as her backup plan, it was meant as a joke, or at least that's how she sold it. It was during one of those rare family dinners where everyone pretended we were closer than we really were. Elizabeth was home for the weekend with her fiancé, Ryan, a stockbroker with the personality of a cardboard box but a bank account big enough to make my parents fawn over him. We were sitting around the dining table, halfway through dessert, when Elizabeth casually leaned back in her chair and said, "Well, if Ryan ever dumps me, at least I know Jackson will always be single and available." The room erupted into laughter, but I just sat there, stunned. It wasn't the kind of joke you expect to hear from your sister, especially not in front of your fiancé, Amelia, who had been sitting quietly beside me. Amelia gave me a small, uncomfortable smile, the kind that said she was trying not to make a scene but didn't find it funny either. Later that night, as we were driving home, Amelia finally said, "Does she always talk to you like that?" Her tone was neutral, but I could tell she was bothered. "Elizabeth is Elizabeth," I replied, trying to brush it off. "She thinks she's being funny." Amelia didn't push it further, but I could see the question lingering in her eyes. She didn't need to say it out loud. I was already asking myself the same thing. Over the next few months, Elizabeth's jokes became a recurring theme. She'd bring it up at the most inappropriate times, always with that same smug smile, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm. At first, I tried to laugh it off, but it was hard not to take it personally. It didn't help that Ryan found it hilarious. Hey, at least you've got a backup plan, buddy," he said once, clapping me on the shoulder. I wanted to punch him in his perfectly chiseled face. Amelia, however, wasn't amused. During one family barbecue, Elizabeth made her usual comment, something along the lines of, "Don't get too comfortable, Ryan. Jackson's been waiting in the wings his whole life." This time, Amelia didn't hold back. "That's incredibly disrespectful," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Jackson isn't anyone's backup plan." The laughter stopped. Elizabeth's face froze for a moment, then twisted into a patronizing smile. "Oh, come on, Amelia. It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." "I'm not sure why you think that's funny," Amelia shot back. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything to Elizabeth. They never did. The drive home that night was silent. I could tell Amelia was furious, but she waited until we were in the privacy of our apartment to let it out. "You need to stand up to her, Jackson," she said, pacing the living room. "This isn't okay. She's treating you like a doormat, and you're letting her." "I know," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "But what am I supposed to do? She's always been like this. If I say anything, it'll just make things worse." "It's already worse," Amelia snapped. "She's undermining you in front of everyone, and your parents just sit there like it's normal." "It's not normal, Jackson. It's toxic." Amelia was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. Confronting Elizabeth felt impossible. She was so good at twisting words and making herself look like the victim. I'd seen her do it 100 times before. Things reached a boiling point a few weeks later at another family gathering. This time, it was my parents' anniversary party, a lavish affair at a fancy restaurant. Elizabeth, as usual, was the center of attention, holding court with Ryan at her side. Amelia and I tried to stay in the background, but Elizabeth wouldn't let us. Halfway through the evening, she raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to my amazing little brother Jackson. He's always been there for me, and I know he always will be, my reliable backup plan." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Amelia's hand tightened on my arm, a silent plea for me to say something. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stand up. "Elizabeth," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like a joke anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised, but then her expression hardened. "Wow, Jackson," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Someone's a little sensitive tonight." "I'm not sensitive," I shot back. "I'm tired. Tired of you belittling me every chance you get. It's not funny, and it's not okay." To my surprise, a few people at the table nodded in agreement. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable, but my parents predictably tried to smooth things over. "Let's not ruin the evening," my mom said, her voice tight. "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, she did," I replied. "And you've let her get away with it for years." That was the moment I realized just how deep the dysfunction ran. My parents weren't going to change. Elizabeth wasn't going to change. The only thing I could change was how I responded to it. Amelia was proud of me for standing up to Elizabeth, but the fallout wasn't pretty. Elizabeth stopped speaking to me for weeks, which honestly felt more like a blessing than a punishment. My parents tried to guilt-trip me into apologizing, saying I'd overreacted and ruined the party, but I didn't budge. For the first time in my life, I put my own feelings above keeping the peace, and it felt liberating. Of course, Elizabeth didn't stay quiet for long. When she finally did reach out, it was under the guise of clearing the air, but it quickly became clear she had no intention of apologizing. Instead, she doubled down, claiming I had misinterpreted her jokes and accusing Amelia of turning me against her. That conversation ended with me hanging up the phone, something I'd never dared to do before. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't just Elizabeth's overshadowed little brother. I was my own person, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else treat me like anything less. The family dinner started like any other. Tense, formal, and pretending to be something it wasn't. My parents had invited us all over for a special evening, a phrase that always made me suspicious. Elizabeth arrived late, as usual, sweeping into the room with Ryan at her side and an air of self-importance that was impossible to ignore. Amelia and I were already seated, making polite conversation with my parents, John and Margaret, and a few extended family members. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Claire, who always seemed like she wanted to be anywhere but with us. Elizabeth barely glanced at me as she made her grand entrance, throwing her arms around my mother and exclaiming, "You look amazing, Mom! Did you lose weight?" Her charm was always dialed to maximum in these settings, and my parents lapped it up like thirsty dogs. Ryan followed behind, carrying a bottle of wine that he presented to my father like it was a peace offering. "Thought this might pair well with dinner," he said, his smile as practiced as Elizabeth's. Amelia, seated beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. She hated these dinners as much as I did, but she came anyway, trying to be supportive. I appreciated her more than I could say, especially on nights like this. The meal started without much drama, the conversation staying light and focused on Elizabeth's latest achievements. She had recently been promoted at work and couldn't stop talking about how her boss had personally requested her for a high-profile project. My parents hung on her every word, nodding and smiling like proud parents at a recital. "And what about you, Jackson?" Elizabeth said suddenly, turning her attention to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What have you been up to?" The question was a trap. It always was. She didn't actually care about the answer. It was just a way to remind everyone that whatever I said would pale in comparison to her latest triumph. "Work's been good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy, but good." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No big promotions? No exciting news?" "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia, "it's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be." She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. "Elizabeth," Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. "That's enough." Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. "What?" "I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him." She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Do you have any idea how offensive that is?" I said, my voice louder than I intended. "You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this." The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. "Oh, come on, Jackson," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's a joke." "It's not a joke," I shot back. "It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior." My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough, Jackson. Sit down." I turned to him, incredulous. "Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem?" "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, her voice tight. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing?" I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it." "Jackson," my father said, his tone warning, "you're out of line." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it?" Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. "Honestly, Jackson," she said, "you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem." Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. "You're unbelievable," she said, glaring at Elizabeth. "You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you," she added, turning to my parents, "should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this." My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the queen. "How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this?" Amelia shot back. "You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you?" The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. You know, she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be. She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. Elizabeth, Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. That's enough. Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. What? I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him. She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Do you have any idea how offensive that is? I said, my voice louder than I intended. You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. Oh, come on, Jackson, she said, rolling her eyes. You're overreacting. It's a joke. It's not a joke, I shot back. It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior. My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough, Jackson. Sit down. I turned to him, incredulous. Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem? Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it, my mother said, her voice tight. You're making a scene over nothing. Nothing? I said, my voice shaking. This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it. Jackson, my father said, his tone warning. You're out of line. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it? Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. Honestly, Jackson, she said, you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem. Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. You're unbelievable, she said, glaring at Elizabeth. You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you, she added, turning to my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this. My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the queen. How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this? Amelia shot back. You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you? The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. My parents didn't speak to me as Amelia and I gathered our things and left. Elizabeth, of course, had the last word. Well, I guess some people just can't handle the truth, she said with a smirk as we walked out the door. In the car, Amelia reached over and took my hand. You did the right thing, she said softly. I'm proud of you. I nodded, though I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, angry, and deeply hurt. But for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and that had to count for something. The drive home from that disastrous dinner was silent for a while, the only sound coming from the hum of the engine. Amelia sat beside me, her arms crossed tightly, her face a storm of emotions. I could feel the anger radiating off her, but beneath it, there was something else, concern for me. Finally, she broke the silence. You can't keep doing this, Jackson. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I know. No, she said, her voice firmer now. I don't think you do. Tonight wasn't just another bad dinner, it was a wake-up call. Your family doesn't respect you. They don't care about your feelings, and they never will unless you set boundaries. She was right, of course, but the thought of distancing myself from my family felt like tearing off a piece of myself. As toxic as they were still my parents, still my sister. The idea of walking away felt both terrifying and freeing. We got home, and as I dropped my keys on the counter, Amelia turned to me, her eyes softening. You deserve better than this, Jackson. You've worked hard for everything you have, and you can't let them keep taking from you, emotionally or otherwise. That last part hit me like a brick. Amelia had brought up concerns about my family's financial ties to me before, especially after I started making a decent living. My parents had a habit of borrowing money that was never repaid, and Elizabeth, ever the opportunist, had hinted more than once about how I could help her out if she and Ryan ever hit a rough patch. I had always brushed it off, thinking it was just family dynamics, but now it felt like another layer of manipulation. I need to think about this, I said finally, my voice heavy. Amelia nodded. Take your time, but don't let them guilt you into staying in this cycle. The next day, I called my friend and coworker Adam. Adam was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had helped me out with a few contracts at work. If anyone could give me sound advice, it was him. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. As I laid out the situation, Adam listened intently, his expression unreadable. First off, he said when I finished, you need to protect yourself. If your family has access to any of your accounts, cut that off immediately. And if you're serious about setting boundaries, you might need to consider more than just limiting contact. You might need to get legal protection. Legal protection? I asked, my stomach sinking. Adam nodded. Look, I'm not saying they're going to sue you or anything, but if your parents or sister feel entitled to your money or anything else, you need to make sure they can't take advantage of you. That means reviewing your assets, setting up trusts if necessary, and maybe even writing a formal letter making your boundaries clear. The thought of it all made my head spin, but I knew he was right. My family had shown time and time again that they didn't respect me, and if I didn't take action, I'd only have myself to blame when things got worse. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of disentangling myself from my family's financial reach. I closed joint accounts my parents had access to, updated the beneficiaries on my insurance policies, and even had Adam draft a will that explicitly stated how my assets would be handled. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for some kind of war, but it was also empowering. Amelia was my rock through it all. She encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't doing this out of spite but to protect myself. This isn't about hurting them, she said one night as we reviewed the documents Adam had prepared. It's about making sure they can't hurt you anymore. The real test came when my parents called a week later. My mother's voice was sugary sweet as she asked if I'd like to come over for dinner to smooth things over. I could hear Elizabeth in the background, laughing about something with Ryan. The image of them sitting there, planning their next subtle dig at my expense, made my stomach turn. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I think it's best if I take some time away from the family for now. There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. Jackson, don't be ridiculous, we're family. We need to stick together. Family doesn't mean I have to tolerate being disrespected, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I need to do this for my own well-being. She sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that was meant to convey disappointment. Fine, if that's how you feel. It wasn't long before the guilt tripping began. Over the next few days, I received a string of messages from both my parents and Elizabeth. My dad kept it short and gruff, accusing me of overreacting and telling me to man up. Elizabeth, predictably, made it all about herself, sending texts like, I can't believe you'd cut us off like this after everything I've done for you. But the one that hit the hardest was from my mother. I just want you to know how much this is hurting us. We've always loved you, Jackson, even if you can't see it. I almost caved after that one. Almost. But Amelia was there, reminding me of why I had made this decision in the first place. Love doesn't look like manipulation, she said gently. And if they really love you, they'll respect your need for space. As time went on, the messages tapered off. My parents stopped calling, and Elizabeth moved on to other targets for her attention. It was a strange feeling, being free from their constant judgment and demands. Lonely at times, yes, but also liberating. I focused on my work, my relationship with Amelia, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Elizabeth's shadow or bending over backward to please my parents. I was just me, and it felt good. But even as I started to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. My family wasn't the type to let things go quietly, and I had a sinking suspicion that my decision to set boundaries would come with consequences I hadn't yet anticipated. The first sign that things were escalating came in the form of a voicemail from my mother. It was late on a Tuesday night when I saw her name flash on my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to dive back into the family drama just yet, but the message she left was hard to ignore. Jackson, she began, her tone clipped and formal, the kind she used when she was holding back anger. Your father and I have been talking, and we feel it's time to discuss the family inheritance. There are some things you need to understand about how we've planned for the future. Call me back as soon as you can. Inheritance. The word sent a chill down my spine. I'd always suspected my parents would use it as a tool to manipulate me, and now it seemed that suspicion was coming true. I replayed the voicemail for Amelia later that evening, pacing the living room as I spoke. "This is them trying to reel me back in," I said, frustration bubbling under the surface. "They can't stand that I've set boundaries, so now they're dangling the inheritance in front of me like a carrot on a stick." Amelia frowned, her arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. "You don't even care about the inheritance, do you?" "Not really," I admitted. "But it's the principle of it. They're trying to control me again, and I'm not sure how to handle it." "Don't play their game," she said firmly. "If you call her back, they'll just use it as an opportunity to guilt trip you. Stick to your boundaries." I knew she was right, but the thought of ignoring the call entirely felt wrong. So the next morning, I texted my mother instead. "I got your message. I'm not interested in discussing inheritance right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her response came almost immediately. "That's not how this works, Jackson. This is a family matter, and you need to be part of the conversation." I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the messages continued. My father chimed in as well, sending curt texts about responsibility and respect for the family legacy. I tried to ignore them, but it was exhausting, like fighting a battle I hadn't signed up for. Then, out of nowhere, Elizabeth entered the fray. She showed up at my office unannounced, striding in like she owned the place. My coworkers exchanged awkward glances as she swept past them to my desk. "Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to talk." I gestured for her to follow me into the conference room, not wanting to make a scene. Once the door was closed, I turned to her, arms crossed. "What are you doing here, Elizabeth?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. "I'm here because Mom and Dad are worried about you. They say you're refusing to discuss the inheritance." "I'm not refusing," I said evenly. "I'm just not interested right now." "Well, you should be," she said, her tone sharpening. "This isn't just about you, Jackson. It's about the entire family. Mom and Dad have worked hard to build this, and you're acting like a spoiled child by ignoring them." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. "Elizabeth, if you come here to lecture me, you can leave. I've made my decision." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something behind her eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration? But she recovered quickly. "Fine," she said, turning to leave. "But don't say I didn't warn you when this all blows up in your face." The encounter left me rattled. Elizabeth's sudden involvement felt calculated, like she was trying to position herself as the savior of the family while painting me as the black sheep. And it wasn't long before I found out just how far she was willing to go. A few weeks later, I got a call from Adam, my lawyer friend. "Jackson," he said, his voice urgent. "I found something you need to see." He sent me an email with an attachment, a financial statement linked to a bank account in Elizabeth's name. The balance was staggering, over $600,000. But what caught my attention was the list of deposits, all marked as transfers from my parents. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. "This can't be real," I muttered. "It's real," Adam said. I double-checked. "Your parents have been funneling money into this account for years, probably under the guise of helping her with expenses." "Why would they do this?" I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Elizabeth was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Of course they'd bankroll her life while leaving me to fend for myself. "You need to confront them about this," Adam said. "And you might want to consider taking legal action to protect yourself. This kind of favoritism could have serious implications for the inheritance or anything else they might try to manipulate you with." The thought of confronting my parents or Elizabeth about this made my stomach turn, but I knew Adam was right. I couldn't let this go unchecked. That weekend, I invited my parents over to my apartment. Amelia was there for support, her presence a steadying force as I prepared for what I knew would be an explosive conversation. When my parents arrived, they were all smiles, as if nothing was wrong. But their expressions changed the moment I brought up the bank account. "I know about the money you've been giving Elizabeth," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Over $600,000. Care to explain?" My mother's face turned pale, while my father's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business," he said gruffly. "It is my business," I shot back. "Because it's a blatant example of how you've always favored her over me. And now you're trying to use the inheritance to manipulate me. I'm done with it." My mother tried to placate me, her voice trembling. "Jackson, we did what we thought was best. Elizabeth needed help." "She needed help?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. While I've been working my ass off to make ends meet, you've been handing her hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds? The argument escalated from there, voices rising as years of resentment came to the surface. My father accused me of being ungrateful, while my mother pleaded for me to see reason. But I wasn't backing down. You've always put Elizabeth first, I said, my voice shaking. And I'm done pretending that's okay. If you want to continue this dynamic, fine. But I won't be part of it anymore. The conversation ended with my parents storming out, my mother in tears and my father muttering something about family loyalty. Amelia hugged me tightly as the door closed behind them, her support the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time, I felt like I had truly taken a stand. It wasn't easy, and I knew there would be fallout, but I also knew it was the only way to reclaim my life. The decision to take legal action against my parents wasn't one I made lightly. For weeks after discovering Elizabeth's secret bank account, I wrestled with the implications of what it meant to sue my own family. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and finally breaking free from the toxic grip my family had on me. Amelia supported me from the beginning, though she made it clear it was my decision to make. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, she said one night as we sat on the couch, the glow of the TV illuminating her determined expression. But if you go through with this, you need to be prepared for how ugly it might get. She wasn't wrong. I knew my parents wouldn't take this lying down, and Elizabeth would undoubtedly make it her mission to turn the situation to her advantage. But I also knew I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. The first step was consulting with Adam, my lawyer friend. He recommended bringing in a specialist, someone with experience in family financial disputes. That's how I met Lauren Green, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who had a reputation for handling complex cases with precision. Lauren didn't sugarcoat anything during our first meeting. This is going to be messy, she said, her piercing blue eyes locked on mine. But based on what you've told me and the evidence you've provided, you have a solid case. If we can prove financial manipulation and favoritism that's impacted your inheritance or financial stability, we can argue for compensation. We began building the case, combing through years of financial records, emails, and text messages. Adam helped me track down additional documentation, including statements from family members who had witnessed the blatant favoritism over the years. My cousin Claire, who had always been quietly supportive, agreed to testify. I've seen how they treat you, Jackson, she said over the phone. It's not right, and it's about time someone called them out on it. The hardest part was revisiting all the moments that had led to this point. Every slight, every insult, every time I was made to feel like I wasn't enough, it all came rushing back as I pieced together the timeline of my family's dysfunction. But with each new piece of evidence, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent, about showing that people couldn't get away with treating others like this, even if they were family. When the lawsuit was officially filed, the fallout was immediate. My parents were furious, of course, but their anger was eclipsed by their disbelief. They genuinely seemed to think I wouldn't have the nerve to go through with it. My father called me the day after the filing, his voice cold and clipped. "You're making a mistake, Jackson," he said. "You're going to regret this." "I think the only mistake I've made is letting this go on for as long as it has," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "This isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about justice." Elizabeth, predictably, was livid. She sent me a series of scathing text messages, accusing me of tearing the family apart and betraying her. "You're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful brat," one message read. "Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them." I didn't bother responding. I knew anything I said would only fuel her rage. The court proceedings began a few months later, and true to Lauren's prediction, it was messy. My parents' lawyer, a smarmy man named Victor Crane, tried to paint me as a greedy, ungrateful son who was lashing out because of jealousy. He brought up every instance where my parents had helped me financially, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one taking advantage of them. But Lauren was ready for him. She methodically dismantled his arguments, presenting evidence of the blatant favoritism and manipulation that had defined my upbringing. She called witnesses who testified about the disparity in how my parents treated me versus Elizabeth, and she presented the damning financial records that showed the hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into Elizabeth's secret account. The most shocking moment came when Lauren called Elizabeth to the stand. She was visibly annoyed, her usual confidence faltering under the weight of the cross-examination. Lauren didn't hold back, pressing her on the specifics of the bank account and the reasons behind the massive transfers from my parents. At first, Elizabeth tried to deflect, claiming the money was for necessary expenses and that my parents had offered it willingly. But when Lauren presented an email exchange between Elizabeth and my mother, in which Elizabeth explicitly demanded more money to cover her lifestyle, her facade cracked. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising. "I don't see why this is even relevant. Jackson is just jealous because he's always been second best." The courtroom fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a confession. Lauren let the moment linger before calmly turning to the judge. "I think that speaks for itself, Your Honor." The trial lasted several weeks, each day more exhausting than the last. But when the verdict finally came, it was worth every moment of stress and heartache. The judge ruled in my favor, citing clear evidence of financial manipulation and emotional harm. My parents were ordered to pay $1.2 million in compensation, a sum that felt less like a windfall and more like a validation of everything I had endured. The victory was bittersweet. I knew the money wouldn't fix the damage my family had done, and it certainly wouldn't repair our broken relationships. But it was a start. A way to reclaim my life and move forward without the weight of their manipulation holding me back. As Amelia and I left the courthouse that day, hand in hand, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I was free. Free to live my life on my own terms, free to build a future that wasn't defined by the shadows of my past. And for the first time, I truly believed I deserved it. Moving to a new city was Amelia's idea, but as soon as she suggested it, I knew it was exactly what we needed. The court case had drained me emotionally and mentally, and staying in the same city felt like staying in the shadow of everything that had happened. The whispers, the sideways glances from people who knew my family, it was suffocating. Amelia found a place 400 kilometers away, a modest but charming apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it had everything we needed, space to start fresh and enough distance from my family to feel like a new chapter. Packing up our lives and saying goodbye to the city I had lived in for so long was bittersweet, but as we drove out of town that morning, I felt an unfamiliar sense of hope stirring in my chest. The new city was different, quieter, friendlier. Our neighbors introduced themselves on the first day, a retired couple named Greg and Marcia who lived across the hall. Greg was a handyman with a knack for fixing anything, and Marcia baked enough cookies to feed an army. "If you ever need anything, just knock," she said with a warm smile, handing us a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. I wasn't used to this kind of welcome. It felt foreign but comforting. Amelia and I threw ourselves into settling in. She started working remotely for her marketing firm, and I found a job managing operations for a local tech startup. It was smaller than what I was used to, but the environment was welcoming, and the lack of corporate drama was a relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The real work, though, began when Amelia suggested we try therapy. "We've been through so much, Jackson," she said one evening as we unpacked boxes in the living room. "I think it could help both of us process everything and maybe help us figure out how to move forward." I hesitated at first. Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered. It felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But Amelia was patient, and eventually, I agreed to give it a try. That's how we met Dr. Claire Matthews, a calm and empathetic therapist who had a way of making you feel safe, even when you were baring your soul. Our first few sessions were rough. Talking about my family dredged up memories I'd buried for years. The favoritism, the manipulation, the constant feeling of being less than. It all came flooding back, and there were moments when I wanted to walk out of her office and never look back. But Amelia was there, her presence steady and unwavering, and with time, I started to open up. Dr. Matthews helped me see patterns I hadn't fully understood before. She showed me how my parents' behavior had shaped not only my self-esteem but also my relationships and decision-making. "You've spent so much of your life trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it," she said during one session. "It's time to focus on what you want and what makes you happy." Amelia and I also worked on our relationship in therapy. The lawsuit, the family drama, the stress, it had taken a toll on both of us, and I hadn't realized how much until we started unpacking it. But the process brought us closer. For the first time, we weren't just surviving, we were building something real, something strong. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I discovered my parents stole my $200,000 trust fund to support my sister. When I exposed them, they got furious and kicked me out of the house. To provide some context, my sister Corey has Down syndrome. She is 4 years older than me, and I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister was different from me in many ways. Even as a small child, I noted that Corey would respond strongly to every circumstance. If things didn't go her way, even in minor ways, She would scream and weep in a manner that most children did not. It was as if she couldn't take the frustration of things not living up to her expectations. Growing up, Corey had no pals. She had difficulty picking up on social cues and frequently came across as abrupt or even rude. While she wasn't trying to be impolite, her directness could be off-putting to other children who didn't comprehend her situation. As a result, many youngsters preferred to maintain their distance, leaving her feeling alienated. As a result, my parents made it a point to include me in her social life, frequently reminding me that I needed to bring her along when I went out with my friends. I realized they wanted her to feel included and have someone to interact with, so I didn't mind having my elder sister along. I felt it would be wonderful for her to have some company, and perhaps even make a few friends through my own social circles. However, spending time with Corey in the company of my friends was not easy. Her social skills were weak, and she struggled to integrate into groups. She often acted out in unexpected ways. She would occasionally push or even strike other children, especially if they had something she wanted. As a result, over time, my pals were less interested in hanging out with me if Corey was also around. They didn't want to deal with her unpredictable behavior, and I understood why. They were merely kids who wanted to play without interruptions or outbursts of hostility. Corey's impatience and inclination to lash out made things difficult for everyone, and I couldn't blame my friends for backing away from those circumstances. I understood that, as her sister, I had a responsibility to support and be there for Corey, especially given her struggles. But, to be honest, I needed space to mature, find my own friends, and live my life independently. However, my parents never let me be myself. Whenever I wanted to go something alone or spend time with my friends without Corey, they made me feel awful for even considering leaving her behind. They'd say things like, "Sisters should stick together," or "You need to think about Corey, she's your sister." It was as if they expected me to always choose her over my friends or anybody else, no matter what I wanted or needed for myself. What made things worse was that they never seemed to put these same efforts into assisting Corey comprehend how to change her conduct or develop her social skills. They never sat her down to explain why sharing or being compassionate with others could help her connect with others more effectively. Instead, they seemed to accept that I would fill in all of the gaps in her social life. So, throughout the years, I became Corey's lone buddy by default. Don't get me wrong, I adore Corey. She is family, and I recognize that none of this is her fault. I understand she confronts her own set of obstacles every day, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in her shoes. But, at the same time, do you know how it feels to be the invisible child in a family? My parents' entire world revolved around Corey, with every choice, idea, and money intended to make her life easier and more comfortable. Corey requires ongoing attention and specialized care. My parents have spent a lot of money on her numerous therapies over the years, including physiotherapy to help with her physical coordination, speech therapy to improve her communication, and occupational therapy to help her develop motor skills and independence. She also gets regular checkups, medical tests, and evaluations to track her progress and keep her health in control. The care she requires is considerable and time-consuming. While I fully grasp its significance, it frequently felt as if there was little place for me. One of Corey's specific issues is her lack of impulse control, which makes understanding boundaries difficult. For example, she is obsessed with the color pink and enjoys anything pink. She is instantly drawn to anything in that color. She feels impelled to seize it, hold it, and not let go. It doesn't matter whether it's a pink pocketbook, a teddy bear, a piece of clothes, or someone else's prized possessions. Once it's in her hands, she clings to it, and if anyone attempts to take it away, she bursts into tears, sometimes having a full-fledged breakdown. This tendency has resulted in numerous unpleasant situations, particularly while we are out in public. My parents frequently have to bargain with individuals or buy these pink trinkets from complete strangers simply to get Corey to calm down. I've seen them pay for a variety of strange pink items, some of which are worthless to us but mean everything to Corey at the time. I understand why they do it, and I understand that it's more than a wish for her. It's practically a need over which she has no control. However, watching my parents devote so much time, money, and mental energy to soothing her urges and satisfying her demands has left me feeling forgotten. Furthermore, my parents' approach to parenting Corey has had serious ramifications over the years. Their method of keeping her satisfied has devolved into what I can only describe as a shopping addiction. For Corey, it began simply enough. Every weekend, my parents would purchase her something pink. A toy, a piece of jewelry, or another trinket, to keep her happy and as a bargaining chip for her cooperation throughout the week. My parents would tell Corey that she had to be a good girl, if she wanted them to give her whatever she wanted, and she would instantly agree. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a cherished family ritual. These purchases are not inexpensive either. Many of the goods Corey desires are one of a kind or custom-made, which frequently requires a significant investment. For a long time, I didn't think about the cost of all this pink stuff. I thought my parents could afford it. I never questioned how they could afford to continue this habit week after week, year after year. But soon, I discovered something I could not have anticipated. My parents had not been managing their expenses through regular budgeting or savings. They have been committing fraud to cover the rising prices. You see, when I was born, my grandparents established a trust fund for both me and Corey, with equal sums given to us. Corey, who has Down syndrome, was supposed to use the money for her therapies or whatever else she needed, but I was supposed to use mine for college or a down payment on a home. Only my parents had access to these funds, but my grandparents trusted them to handle them carefully. They also made certain that Corey and I were aware of these trust funds from a young age, allowing us to rely on them for financial support. It was a thoughtful present from my grandparents, and I always felt secure knowing that the trust fund would be available when the time came. When Corey reached 18, she received a portion of the trust monies. Since she still lives with and relies on my parents, they have been in charge of managing her money. They've utilized her trust fund over the years to assist pay for her treatments and therapies, which have become more demanding as she's gotten older. The money has helped with everything, from her medical treatment to providing the materials she requires for daily life. I recognized that the money was intended to meet her needs, and I never questioned how it was being spent. When I turned 18, I anticipated to get my half of the trust fund, as promised. I had previously planned to utilize the money for my college tuition. Once that was taken care of, I intended to preserve the remainder for any additional bills that would arise as I approached maturity. I had my future planned out, and I was counting on that fund to help me forge a steady route forward. But little did I know, my hopes would soon be dashed. My grandparents arranged a fantastic 18th birthday party for me last week. They had done the same for Corey when she turned 18, so I had been looking forward to my own celebration for quite some time. They had invited everyone in their family. I was genuinely pleased, surrounded by the people I cared about, and it was one of those days when everything felt just right. Following the cake cutting, my grandparents made an announcement to the entire gathering. They told me how proud they were to see me all grown up and gone to college, and that as a birthday present this year, I would receive the trust fund they had put up for me years before. The entire room erupted in cheers and clapping, with everyone praising me on this incredible gift. I felt a rush of exhilaration and thankfulness come over me as I hugged and thanked my grandparents for everything. But in the midst of all the enthusiasm, I saw that my parents were the only ones who did not appear joyful. While everyone else smiled and congratulated me, my parents seemed unconcerned. They stood off to the side, their faces strained, almost uncomfortable. I could see them exchanging glances, and while they didn't say anything, there was a discomfort to them that was difficult to miss. It struck me as peculiar, but in the excitement of the celebration, I didn't give it much thought. I wanted to enjoy the rest of the party, so I put it to the back of my mind. Later that evening, when we got home from the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. My parents appeared uptight and didn't speak much with me. Typically, they were concerned about Corey's health, mood, or anything she needed. But that night, Corey appeared absolutely satisfied, playing with one of her new gifts. Sensing something else was going on, I finally asked my folks if there was anything wrong. That's when my father gave me a serious look and informed me that he and my mother needed to talk to me alone. The tone of his voice immediately sent shivers down my spine. I could see it was serious. We sat together in the living room, and they exchanged troubled looks before my father began to talk. He explained, almost tentatively, that they wouldn't be able to give me my trust fund as my grandparents had planned. I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked him to clarify. My father continued, his voice full of shame and despair. He revealed that throughout the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. When there was nothing left, they began to utilize the money from my trust fund, which they had access to. With a big sigh, he revealed that 90% of my trust fund was already gone, leaving little for me. I was taken aback as I considered what he had just stated. The money set aside for my future, for my education, was gone. He went on to say that the majority of money had been spent on my sister's shopping habit and the various treatments she required. As his words sank in, a numbness crept over me. My thoughts raced, attempting to figure out how this happened without my knowledge. They had raided my trust fund without informing me, to cover Corey's bills and habits. I questioned why they would do something like this to me. My parents began to justify themselves, their words laced with defensiveness. They informed me that caring for Corey had cost them a lot of money, but they had no choice but to do it. Her needs have always come first. My father discussed the never-ending expenses, the therapies, treatments, and, of course, the innumerable gifts she required every week to stay calm. I contended that they could have ceased buying her all of those items when they learned they were financially taxing. They did, however, highlight that for Corey, these goods were more than just luxuries. They were things that helped her manage and made her world a bit simpler to understand. And for them, every penny spent had been worthwhile. They couldn't simply refuse her. At that point, I felt a rush of rage fill up inside me. I questioned how they could justify spending nearly everything I had saved for my future without even speaking with me. Didn't I matter to them? My father tried to calm me down, stating that I needed to comprehend what they had been through. He discussed the stress they'd felt, the sacrifices they'd had to make as Corey's caregivers, and how difficult it was to satisfy her requirements week after week. My mother nodded, noting that Corey's condition necessitated continual care. And sometimes that meant spending money in ways that were unfair to me but were important for Corey. Both of them felt that because I didn't have any of Corey's ailments, I had an advantage over her, therefore I shouldn't be so greedy with the money. I felt a tear of frustration run down my cheek as I assured them that I wasn't doubting Corey's needs or their decision to prioritize her care. I loved her too. But this was about the lack of honesty, how they had gone behind my back and exploited what was meant to be my future without believing I deserved to know. I informed them that this trust money had been my only source of security, the one thing I felt I could rely on to start my life on my own, and it was now almost completely gone. Instead of addressing how upset and betrayed I felt, they began gaslighting me, turning the subject around on me. They expressed disappointment that I couldn't be more understanding, and that as Corey's sister, I should appreciate that sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They said, "We are all in this together." I was astounded that they wanted me to simply accept it all as a fool. To realize that Corey's needs had to come first, no questions asked. I questioned them why it was always Corey and not me. Did they not want me to do anything in my life? That's when my parents revealed a plan they had for my future, which revolved solely around taking on the task of caring for Corey. They explained that they never cared about my education because it isn't that important. They expected me to step up and help them with Corey's financial and emotional needs. My mother looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, saying, "You know, we're getting older, and it's exhausting looking after Corey. We won't be able to do this forever, so we need you to step in." She went on to say that they didn't mind if I went to a local college rather than the college of my choice. She only hoped I'd get a steady job as soon as I graduated so I could bring Corey to live with me. Then she said we could finally rest. Dad advised that I start contributing financially sooner, while still in college, by working a part-time job and sending money home to Corey. It would help Corey have some independence in her life, he told me, by letting her buy whatever it is that she wants and allowing her to maintain the lifestyle we've provided for her. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out what my folks expected me to do. At that point, I felt completely misled and frustrated. This was not the future I envisioned for myself. It seemed as if my parents expected me to abandon my own aspirations and plans in order to easily transition into their role as Corey's caregiver, without ever asking what I desired for my own life. Finally, I roared at them, my voice quivering with years of accumulated rage and hurt. Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even thought to ask me what I wanted, did you? All these years, I've been expected to just give, and now you're pushing me to be Corey's caretaker so you can rest. How is any of this fair? My voice trembled as the rage spilled out. You're making decisions for me without even considering what it means for my life. I can't just drop everything for Corey and pretend like my dreams don't matter. All of my bottled up anger spilled out, years of feeling forgotten, years of being told I needed to prioritize Corey, and years of watching them pander to her every whim while I was expected to quietly support from the sidelines. My folks constantly attempt to persuade me that I shouldn't be so selfish and inconsiderate. It was as if they wanted me to conform and embrace a life I had never planned for simply because they believed it was better for Corey. So, since last week, I've been completely ignoring my parents. All I feel for them is contempt. Am I the a-hole for reporting my parents for taking my trust fund and spending it on my sister? Update 1. Wow, this post has gone viral in just a few hours. Thank you for all your advice. I am currently on my way to tell my grandparents everything. Since the trust fund was created with their money, I believe it is critical that I have their support while I confront this matter. After I've explained everything to them, I plan to let my grandparents decide what we should do next. I trust their judgment and know they will have my best interests at heart as we find out how to tackle this together. I had kept my voice shut all this time because I truly believed my folks would finally come around. However, it is evident that they have not. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update, so I told my grandparents everything. They were as astonished as I was to learn that my parents had utilized my trust fund without my authorization. That same week, my grandparents came to question my parents about what had happened to my trust fund. My grandparents had worked hard to establish the fund for both me and Corey. They were deeply committed to ensuring that we have the financial resources we require for our futures. They were understandably upset when they discovered that my parents had illegally drained the money behind their backs. My parents answered by telling them the same sob story they had shared with me. They recounted, once again, how they had been obliged to spend the money on Corey's care and therapy. They urged my grandparents to explain why they did what they did, as if their rationale would somehow make it all right. But my grandfather would have none of it. He roared at them, his voice filled with fury and amazement. He told them unequivocally that they were accountable for repaying the whole trust fund, regardless of the circumstances or justifications for its use. He was visibly angry and felt betrayed by my parents' conduct. For a moment, I hoped they'd finally accept responsibility and set things right. Then, frightened, my mother came to my grandparents and began pleading with them. She indicated that caring for Corey was difficult, and that her needs were numerous and frequent. She stated that Corey's trust money was insufficient to support the increasing costs of her treatments and ongoing bills. She rationalized taking my trust fund by claiming it helped them care for Corey. And then, in an almost horrible twist of fate, my parents turned against me. They reprimanded me for telling my grandparents everything. They were upset that I had revealed their activities and forced them to face the repercussions. My dad, in particular, was furious. He told me, with a strong edge in his voice, that I should consider myself fortunate since I was born normal, unlike Corey, and that I shouldn't despise her sister so much. It was as if my entire life, my challenges and needs, didn't matter. Everything revolved around Corey. And now I was being punished for not fitting in with the role they had chosen for me. Without thinking, I looked them in the eye and told them straight out that if they didn't give me back the money I owed, I would sue them and make sure they went to jail for their actions. I reminded them that what they did was illegal, and there was no way they could justify it in court. They couldn't prove otherwise that the trust fund was intended for me and only me. My tone was calm, but my comments were plain and firm. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces as they comprehend what I had just spoken. For the first time, I genuinely stood up for myself, and I could see the shock in their faces. They were not used to me being that straightforward. So resolute. Fortunately, my grandparents nodded in accord. They supported me because they knew I was correct. Seeing their encouragement, I persisted, speaking with greater conviction. I told my parents that it didn't matter how much they spent on Corey or what they did for her. Corey was their child, and it wasn't my obligation to give up my future for her. I loved Corey, of course, and I would always be there for her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my own life, education, and goals just to make her feel cared for. I made it plain that I was tired of always coming second to her, of being overlooked while her needs were always prioritized. I finished by declaring I was done with them. I had had enough of being treated like the invisible child, who was expected to meekly accept whatever scraps were left for her. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I knew I could never take it back. My parents had pushed me to my limit, and I was not going to allow them to continue to dictate my life. My father instantly disagreed, his voice full of shock and anger, insisting that I couldn't threaten them with jail. He told me that as their child, I should have family loyalty and be willing to support them at all times, especially after everything they had done for me over the years. His statements were intended to make me feel guilty and to remind me of my responsibilities to them. My mother, attempting to ease the situation, even weighed in, proposing that since there was still 10% of my trust fund remaining, I could simply accept it and keep my mouth shut. It felt like they were treating me like a charity case, as if the residual crumbs from my trust fund were all I deserved and I should forget about anything else. But my granddad refused to back down. He came in, his voice stern, and informed my parents that if they didn't agree to give me back the full amount, he would get the best lawyer in town to sue them. The possibility of legal action appeared to have had a significant impact on my parents. They eventually became silent, recognizing my grandfather meant business. After a tense exchange, they reluctantly admitted that what they had done was incorrect. Nonetheless, they begged my grandparents for some time to consider things over. However, the ramifications didn't stop there. My father was furious with me for exposing them to my grandparents and threatening him and mom with jail time. In his rage, he declared that he never wanted to see my face again. He urged me to leave his house, stating he had had enough of supporting a selfish person like me, someone who could backstab their own family, like this. When my grandparents heard this, they quickly offered to have me move in with them. They assured me that I always had a home with them and that they would help me in every way they could as I worked out my next steps. So, without hesitation, I packed my clothing, gathered my necessary documents, and moved out of my parents' house. Currently, I live with my grandparents. I hate that my parents have just kicked me out, but I'm also relieved to be away from them. I miss Corey a lot. I'm aware that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family. However, I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated. After much pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally signed an agreement drawn out by my grandfather's lawyer. The terms were easy. Because they could not repay the entire cash they had taken from me in one lump sum, they would make installments over the next 18 months. This would give them time to pay off the loan gradually, without putting a hardship on their finances all at once. However, the agreement had a vital stipulation. If they failed to make any payment by the agreed-upon date, or if they did not follow through at all, my grandparents and I had the right to initiate urgent legal action. This clause served as a safeguard, ensuring that they couldn't avoid paying me back. My folks are still unhappy with me. They blame me for everything that has happened, and it seems like they are unable to let go of their wrath or humiliation. They still don't understand why I took the actions I did and stood up for myself in such a dramatic fashion. Despite their hatred, my grandma has assured me that none of this is my fault. She told me again today that I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my future, and that I should focus on moving forward now rather than looking back. I see Corey from time to time. She misses me, and I miss her also. She frequently inquires about me, and it is evident that she is unaware of the complete picture. But she understands enough to see that something significant occurred between us. She's noticed that I'm not as present as I once was and that my parents did something to injure me. It's horrible not to be able to help her understand how bad our parents are. Regardless, I'll always be there for her. I was left at the altar when my fiancée ran off with my brother. 2 years later, she asked for my help, claiming she now saw the toxicity of my family. 2 years ago, I stood at the altar, ashamed and heartbroken. My fiancée ditched me an hour before the wedding and took off with my brother. I never saw it coming, or perhaps I overlooked the warning signs because I adored her. We had been together for 5 years, and I assumed we were happy. However, looking back, it is evident that I was unaware of many things. My family never treated me as a priority. My parents always favored my brother. He was the golden child, attractive, wealthy, and the type of guy everyone gravitated toward. I was the quieter one, always being compared to him, making me feel like I didn't measure up. Growing up, I was always asked why I couldn't be more like my brother. Or your brother did it, why can't you? I expected things to change as we got older, but they didn't. If anything, things grew worse. My fiancée had everything I wanted in a partner: intelligent, attractive, and determined. However, she had a selfish side. It wasn't clear at first. It manifested itself in little ways, such as insisting on always getting her way or never apologizing when she wounded my feelings. I dismissed it because I loved her and believed we were creating a life together. I never expected her to betray me the way she did. The wedding was meant to be the best day of my life. Everything was ready: the venue, the food, and the guests. I awoke nervous yet delighted, knowing that I would soon begin a new chapter with the lady I loved. Then, 1 hour before the ceremony, she called me. Her voice was calm, almost frigid, when she told me she couldn't do it. She stopped loving me. Then she revealed the true bombshell. She had been dating someone else. That person was my brother. She didn't even appear guilty about it. She stated she didn't want to hurt me, but she felt compelled to follow her heart. I didn't even have time to digest what she said before hanging up. My parents, who had already arrived at the event, knew. My brother had told them earlier in the morning. Instead of supporting me, they tried to keep things calm to avoid humiliating themselves. When I addressed them, they defended her. They said things like, "Maybe it's for the best, and you don't want to marry someone who doesn't love you." My mother even had the arrogance to advise that I be happy for them. My father was no better. He simply stood there and ordered me to keep it together. It wasn't until later that I discovered my parents' involvement in all of this. My brother had always been interested in her, and they seemed to think she was too good for me. They decided she would be a better fit for him. They had been urging her to select him for months, even offering her financial support if she left me for him. I had no clue my family could be that deceptive. I walked out of the venue that day without looking back. I left everything behind, including my family, friends, and hometown. I couldn't stand being near any of them. I went to another state and started again. I got a job, a little apartment, and spent the next 2 years repairing my life. At first, it was difficult. I knew no one, and the loneliness was overwhelming. But as time passed, I discovered serenity. I met new people, began treatment, and concentrated on myself for the first time in my life. I did not inform anyone where I was or how to reach me. I didn't want anything to do with those who had deceived me. Then, 2 years later, my ex-fiancée arrived at my home. I had just returned home from work, and when I opened the door, I could scarcely recognize her. She appeared fatigued and worn out, as if she hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Her once confident and polished manner was gone. She shook and her eyes were red from sobbing. She told me that living with my brother had become a nightmare. He was manipulative, emotionally abusive, and disloyal. Behind closed doors, the beloved golden child turned out to be a monster. They had married shortly after our wedding catastrophe and had a child together, but their relationship had crumbled. My parents, who had previously been so willing to assist her, turned against her when she failed to achieve their expectations. She stated that she felt caged, alone, and terrified. She intended to divorce my brother but was scared of what he may do. He possessed money, contacts, and a vicious streak. She was afraid he would wreck her finances and take their child away. She approached me because she believed I could assist. She asked me to testify in court about how toxic and manipulative my family was. She believed my testimony would boost her case and help her keep custody of her child. I stood there, listening to her angry. She had made her decisions. She knew exactly what kind of person my brother was, yet she picked him over me. She allowed my family to manipulate her and went away without looking back. And now, after everything she has put me through, she expects me to come to her rescue. I told her no. I did not yell or quarrel, I just said no. I closed the door, it felt nice. But it did not last. A few days later, the texts began. She managed to spread the news about her arrival. Old friends and even mutual acquaintances began reaching out to me. They labeled me selfish, spiteful, and cowardly for refusing to assist a woman in need. Her former maid of honor, the same girl who was meant to support her at our wedding, sent me a lengthy note about how I was not man enough to step up. She claimed I was confirming my family's point. That I was weak and did not deserve my ex in the first place. I couldn't believe their arrogance. These people had departed from my life following the wedding. None of them had spoken up for me back then, but now they believed they had the right to lecture me. I disregarded the majority of it, but it still stung. They had no idea what I had gone through. They didn't care. They simply wanted me to fix a situation that was not mine to fix. Now I'm wondering if I did the proper thing. I owe my ex-fiancée nothing. She created her bed, and now she must lie in it. But there's a youngster involved. An innocent child who didn't pick this situation. Part of me wonders if my refusal to assist will harm him in the long run. At the same time, aiding her would mean reintroducing my family and her drama into my life. And I am not sure I am willing to do it. Reddit, what would you have done in my position? Did I make the right decision, or am I also selfish? Update 1. I honestly didn't anticipate my post to get so viral. To be honest, when I originally started penning things out, I had no idea if anyone would care. But now I'm reading through hundreds of comments, some helpful, some difficult to read, and it's been a lot to comprehend. Thank you to everyone who has offered advice or simply expressed their thoughts. Whether you agree with me or not, I appreciate your support and diverse viewpoints. Writing all of this out has definitely helped me go through a lot of emotions and gain some clarity. But it's also brought out a lot of feelings I thought I'd buried deep down. After posting, I spent the rest of the evening reading the comments. Some individuals brought up points I hadn't considered, such as the possibility that getting engaged in my ex-fiancée's legal difficulties may exacerbate the situation. Not only for me, but for the child as well. Others were more direct, instructing me to keep as far away as possible. She created her bed. Now she may lie in it. Those statements helped me feel better about my first reaction to her turning up at my home. But then there were the ones who mentioned something different. The child. I know I don't owe anything to my ex-fiancée. But hearing so many people say, the child is innocent in all of this, really got to me. Many of you suggested that I try to do something for the kid without being drawn back into the poisonous mess that is my family. And it is what I have been struggling with ever since. I don't want anything to do with her or my brother again. I don't want to be the hero or decent guy in a situation where I'm only setting myself up for further heartbreak. But at the same time, I feel compelled to do something, even if it isn't for her. It's funny though. After reading so many of your comments, I began to wonder if there was anything I could do that wouldn't need me to communicate with her again or get dragged back into the drama. I even pondered phoning a lawyer to see what would happen if I testified or aided in some manner. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. It's still not my responsibility to change anything. And especially not if it involves interacting with my poisonous family again. However, the guilt of knowing that the child is trapped in the center of this chaos persists. Then, like clockwork, my brother reappeared in the image. The email. Yesterday morning, I received an email from him. Yes, my brother, the one I haven't spoken to in 2 years. The last time we did this was when I canceled my wedding. His email was frigid, and simply reading it made my stomach plummet. It was short and to the point. I heard our ex-fiancé asked you for aid. This is a tremendous error. If you become interested, keep out of family matters. You'll regret it. I stared at the message for much too long. I was inclined to respond, but then I thought, why the hell should I? This guy is the one who forced me out of my own life. He was the one who perpetrated all of this manipulation with my ex. And now he believes he can tell me what to do? The arrogance. To be honest, I'm not sure if the word audacity is strong enough to describe how I feel about him. But I did not answer. I could not be bothered. It's almost funny how entitled he still feels. He has no idea what I've been through or what I've had to deal with over the years, and yet he believes he gets to decide how I should handle things. Number thanks. That was when the phone rang. An unknown number. And I am sure you can guess who it was. Yep. My mother. After 2 years of silence, she finally decided to phone me. The moment I picked up the phone and heard her voice, I was reminded of all the reasons I'd cut ties with her and my father. I didn't even get a "how have you been?" or "I miss you" before she got right into it. She began discussing the divorce, my brother, and how I needed to be the bigger person and maintain peace for the benefit of the family. That's when I snapped. I don't recall what I said, but I know I told her I didn't want to hear it anymore. She went on, however, about how difficult things were for my brother and how I was punishing the child by not intervening. I told her I didn't care and wasn't going to fix their mess anymore. I hung up after that. That conversation made me numb. For some reason, it reminded me of everything my parents had done to me, how they always favored my brother, how they tolerated his worst conduct, and how they always expected me to be the quiet one who simply accepted everything they threw at me. It has never been about me. Not once. I've always been the backup son, expected to deal with whatever trash came my way. Hearing my mother defend my brother again was like getting slapped in the face. It made me realize that nothing had changed, not with my parents or with him. And to be honest, it is why I am not returning. As tempting as it is to take the moral high ground, I know I'd only be perpetuating the toxic cycle. So, I'm finished. I've made peace with going away, but this situation has resurfaced many old scars that I thought were healed. As much as I want to block everything out and pretend it's not happening, I can't ignore the reality that the child is caught in the center of it all. I keep thinking about how helpless he must feel as he watches everything unfold. I know he is innocent, but what if he is being emotionally manipulated, as my ex was? It kills me just thinking about it. Still, I keep telling myself that this is not my struggle. I've already been through enough, and I'm not about to be drawn back into their drama. I've been sitting with these emotions for a few days, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wants to just move on, leave them to their mess, and walk away forever. But there's another part of me that wonders if I can aid the child without getting sucked back into the fray. I'm not sure what the correct move is yet. But I do know one thing: I cannot allow myself to return to the person I was before. The one who was always trying to make everything better for everyone else while ignoring my own needs. I worked way too hard to get here to be dragged back in. But the remorse over the child? Yes, it is still there. And it isn't going away anytime soon. How would you handle my situation? Would you help, or would you just walk away? I'm having trouble finding the right balance. Update 2. I figured things would calm down following my last update, but I was mistaken. Instead, things have become even worse, and I'm honestly wondering how I put up with these individuals for so long. I feel like the universe is putting my determination to the test. Every time I believe I've erected a tall enough wall to keep them out, someone finds a way to sneak over it or slip through a crack. Since my mother's call, I've been completely inundated. It began with a few texts from my extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. And now it appears that they have all established a single front. They're coming at me from all sides, accusing me of damaging the family by not supporting my brother, or, worse, by remaining out of his family problems, despite the fact that I am doing just that. It's as if they believe I'm bound to get engaged simply because we share blood. Some of them have even accused me of holding a grudge and not being a man about it. I've been working hard over the last 2 years to restore my life and move on from the toxic disaster they created. They now believe I should abandon everything in order to return to the drama. It is exhausting. They don't understand that leaving away was not a choice made out of spite, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep living in that familial dynamic. It was suffocating. But they do not want to hear that. To them, family means unwavering commitment, even if it means sacrificing your happiness and well-being. On top of all the familial drama, I've begun receiving emails from my ex-fiancée. She's been sending them every few days now. I initially ignored them but ultimately caved in and opened one. I almost wished I hadn't, because they were all identical. She begs me to reconsider, emphasizing how much I can help her and her child. Each email is more urgent than the last, and she has even started sending photos of the child. I understand she's in a bad predicament, but the entire situation feels exploitative. She knows I'm not heartless, and I believe she's attempting to use that against me. She seems to know that if she tugs on my heartstrings, I will give in. The thing is, I am not stupid. I see what she is doing. But I can't deny it makes me feel guilty. I did not ask for those photos, and I did not want them. But she knows I'll look at them, and the child's face in those photos, with his little eyes looking up at me, guilt trips me more than anything else. I can't shake the feeling that I'm letting him down, although knowing that not becoming engaged is the correct thing to do. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, one of my old acquaintances contacted me unexpectedly. He's someone I haven't communicated with in years, but he obviously heard about the scenario through the grapevine. He called me late one evening, and when his name appeared on the screen, I almost didn't respond. I wasn't in the mood for another, "you should do the right thing" conversation, but I answered anyway. He didn't even waste time exchanging pleasantries. He stepped straight in, telling me to be the larger person and aid my ex-fiancée, even if it was simply to safeguard the child. He went on to say that I couldn't just let a child suffer because of my brother's actions. I'm not sure if he didn't comprehend the whole picture or if he just didn't care, but it was evident to me that he expected me to help simply because it was the moral thing to do. He depicted me as a monster for not immediately going to her rescue. I told him I couldn't help and that the matter was between her, my brother, and my family, not me. But he didn't hear it. He accused me of being stubborn, carrying grudges, and neglecting this child's needs. He made it sound as if I was abandoning someone who was obviously in need. But here's the thing, she's not the only person in need. I've spent so many years in this toxic environment, dealing with everyone else's problems but never my own. I am done with that. I quickly stopped the call, but it only made me feel more conflicted. I wanted to defend myself and explain why I wasn't going to get involved, but I didn't. I understand it is not my obligation to clean up this mess. I understand she and her family made their decisions, and they now have to live with them. But the guilt is still there. No matter how hard I try, it's been difficult to focus on anything else lately. I find myself questioning everything. I went out with some friends the other day to distract myself from the situation, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. One of them even joked that I was being a good Samaritan by not getting involved, which made me laugh. But it wasn't amusing. It only made me feel even more alienated. My buddies don't truly comprehend what I'm going through. The few friends I have left from my old life are either too afraid to speak up or simply believe I am doing the right thing. However, it does not feel right. Especially when a child is involved. I've also been thinking about how my ex-fiancée's situation could worsen if my brother and parents continue to press for full custody. I'm honestly not sure what could happen. My family has always been adept at manipulating the system, and I've witnessed them do so previously. I'm concerned that the youngster will be placed in a circumstance that is as horrible, if not worse, than what he is now suffering with. Despite these sentiments, I can't bring myself to get personally involved. So, I am still stuck. Part of me continues thinking that remaining out of it is the proper decision. But another part of me is questioning if I'm making the wrong decision. Will I live in regret if I don't help? And if I do help, would it only lead me back into their toxic world? This is a no-win situation. What would you do in my shoes? Would you aid the child, even if it meant reconnecting with your poisonous family again? Or would you keep your distance and let them sort things out for themselves? Update 3. After reading more of your comments and reflecting on the situation, I realized I couldn't sit back and do nothing, for the sake of the child. While I owe nothing to my ex-fiancé or my family, I understood that the child did not choose to be born into this situation. He is innocent. And if I have the means to help him escape the toxic environment that my brother and family have created, I should try. But I also realized that if I was going to do something, I needed to keep my peace in the process. I will not let them take me back into their world. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life and set boundaries, and I'm not going to give it all up for something out of my control. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Eventually, I came up with what I thought was the best compromise. I submitted an anonymous report to Child Protective Services, CPS. At first, I was unsure whether this was the proper decision. But as I thought about it more, it seemed evident that this was the only way I could possibly help without getting dragged back into the pandemonium. One evening, I sat down with all of the information I had. What my ex-fiancée had told me about my brother's behavior, how my parents treated her, and how toxic and manipulative the family dynamic had always been. I added all pertinent detail I could think of. I didn't simply talk about the physical and mental trauma my ex-fiancée had experienced. I also discussed how my brother's dominating behavior had impacted everyone around him, particularly her. I detailed how he had always used his charm to trick everybody, including my parents, into turning a blind eye to what he did. I made sure to explain how my parents had always supported him, making excuses for him and putting me aside in the process. I realized that if CPS was to investigate the incident, they would need to grasp the entire context of the child's surroundings. My brother's behavior was not the only issue. My family had always opted to enable his acts rather than hold him accountable. I also attached screenshots of some of the emails my ex-fiancée sent me. She had expressed her fear for herself and the child, her sense of being imprisoned in the marriage, and her lack of a support system. I knew I didn't have first-hand evidence of abuse against the child, but I hoped CPS would find enough in what I presented to launch an investigation. They might not be able to locate enough to intervene, but they would at least be aware of the situation. I needed to know that someone was watching out for the child, even if it wasn't me. Filing that report felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. It was the proper thing to do, but I didn't have to return to the craziness of my old life. I informed CPS that I wanted to remain anonymous and did not want to be contacted for follow-ups or participate in the case in any way. I did not want my name mentioned. I just wanted to make sure the kid was secure, and I felt if CPS thought my report had merit, they'd look into it further without my involvement. I did not expect immediate feedback or closure. CPS was unlikely to provide me with updates, and if they did, it would most likely be after they had done an inquiry. I was at ease knowing that I had done everything I could. I didn't have to reopen old wounds from my family's dysfunction, nor did I have to get caught up in their drama. At the end of the day, the report was the most effective thing I could do without jeopardizing my mental health or the life I'd worked so hard to rebuild. In the days that followed, I attempted to concentrate on moving forward, which is easier said than done. My family is relentless, and every time I think they'll leave me alone, another message or email appears. This time, it wasn't simply my mother and a distant cousin. This time, my brother reached out. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer. He sent me a short email accusing me of betraying the family and acting vindictively. He told me I was making a major mistake and would regret it. But there was something else about the tone of the message that made me pause for a moment. It wasn't simply anger. He was concerned. I did not even bother responding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything he said was pure manipulation. It was not about him. It was about control. And I wasn't about to fall for it again. I've done this song and dance previously. It is always the same. They try to make me feel awful about setting boundaries and doing the right thing. But, in the end, they're the ones who caused this mess. I don't owe them an explanation anymore, for anything. I hadn't heard from my ex-fiancée in a few days, which was a relief, until yesterday, when I received one final email from her. It was short. Just a simple message that read, "Thank you. And I'm sorry for what I put you through." There are no details. No explanations. Only those words. It left me with mixed emotions. On the one hand, I'm relieved she acknowledged the pain she caused. But on the other hand, it made me realize how much she is going through. Perhaps something has changed in her situation, or she is finally recognizing the truth of her predicament. Regardless, it's evident that she's still battling. I don't know what will happen next in her custody struggle, but if there's even a slim chance she can get the child out of that harmful atmosphere, I hope it goes well for her. But I have to tell myself that I cannot get back engaged. I can't solve her problems. And I've already contributed significantly. Now it is up to the authorities. If CPS investigates and finds sufficient evidence to act, I will have done my part. If not, I'll have to admit that I can't control everything, no matter how much I want to. Final update. Thank you to everyone who has provided advice, encouragement, and even tough love. Your words helped me understand the big picture and gave me the confidence to act without second-guessing myself. And to anyone reading this who may be in a similar situation, It's okay to keep your peace. You can care for others while still maintaining your boundaries. Doing the right thing can sometimes entail taking a step back and allowing the system to work. You don't have to repair everything yourself. Do what you can and leave the rest to people who are more qualified to manage it. I'm not sure what will happen next, with my ex-fiancé, my brother, or any of this mess. But I know one thing. Whatever happens, I will be fine.